Chapter 735. Levis stood on the deck with a serious expression. According to List's instructions, the family fleet had assembled on the Coral Island for 2 days before setting off. The Eagle Kingdom was invading. The Tulip family's choice was to wait for the Grand Duke and the Bearhawk Kingdom to fight for a while, and then make subsequent plans. In any case, with List's Ghost Blade inheritance, even if he surrendered to the Eagle Kingdom, he would still be valued. They were about to arrive at Cowhoof City. Perhaps the war between the two countries had already started, Cowhoof City had already fallen, and the Tulip family's choice had already begun. I don't know what Father and List's choice is, to stay in Sapphire, or to surrender to the Eagle Kingdom? He pondered, somewhat vexed. The vampire called Mary Dawn Daybreak had led the blood servants to Cowhoof City to investigate, and would soon bring back the news that would decide whether the fleet should continue to Cowhoof City. The process of waiting was torturous, especially since it was related to the future of the family and Levis's own future. Before leaving, his wife Rolia Golden Wheatsway told him that he must listen to the decisions of his father and brother, and not to make his own decisions. This made him very unhappy. He was not happy with Rolia's attitude, as if he was brainless. He was obviously 6 years older than List. Could it be that just because the other party was lucky enough to obtain the inheritance of an ancient warrior, it meant that the other party had a better view of the overall situation than him? He was also unhappy with the ambiguous attitude of Lee William and List regarding the position of the family. Because from the beginning he did not want the family to choose to surrender to the Eagle Kingdom. He was reluctant to give up the status of Sapphire. In Sapphire he was the heir of the Oxtail Marquis, the future Sir Marquis. Once he surrendered to the Eagle Kingdom, it would be difficult to keep his title. After all, the other party valued his younger brother List more. He was very jealous of List. Of the 4 siblings, he had always been a genius since he was a child. Even though the youngest Lytton later showed excellent aptitude, he was still a genius. No matter where he went, people would add the words "genius of the Coral Island" to address him. However, List, who had been unremarkable since he was a child and had nothing but his handsomeness, rose rapidly after the enfeoffment. He had become the brightest young noble in Sapphire City. From then on, only List could bear the title of Genius of Coral Island. It would be difficult for others to be called geniuses. On the contrary, others would always point fingers at him behind his back, as if Levis, who had yet to become a Sky Knight, was a good-for-nothing and a disgrace to the Tulip family. However, thinking of this, the corners of Levis's mouth suddenly curled up into a proud arc. When Father and List meet again, he will definitely be surprised. There was no other reason. He was no longer an elite Earth Knight, Levis, but an ordinary Sky Knight, Levis. During the voyage the day before yesterday, the chi in his body naturally boiled. After a while, it had become a high-grade water chi and could soar into the sky. Extending a hand, surging with high-grade chi, Levis's heart surged again. I'm afraid that Rolia did not expect that I would become a Sky Knight so quickly. She told me to talk less and be more obedient because I was not strong enough. Now that my strength has soared, who would dare to ignore my opinion? Just then a black bat flew in the distance. Levis narrowed his eyes, especially that Mary. She was very arrogant on the ship and directly ignored my goodwill. Wait for me to greet List and ask for Mary. Let's see if she can still be proud. Although List is very strong, he should give me the Sky Knight face. When he was still an Earth Knight, he knew that List would not respect him. Strength was the basis of his words. But now that he had become a Sky Knight, standing on the same level as List, he had more confidence in his words. Rustle. The bat came to the bow of the ship and suddenly turned into a tall female vampire. It was not Mary but Peggy. Under the cloak was an ordinary female face. Levis had no interest in this face, even if he had always wanted to taste the taste of a vampire. Sir Levis. Peggy hid in the shade of the sail. Vampires did not like the sun. Levis squinted his eyes and said, "How is the situation in Oxfoot City? The fleet can enter the city at any time. The Eagle Kingdom has been defeated and Sapphire has won a great victory." Peggy's voice was filled with boundless excitement. She was still a little dizzy. How did her master become a fire dragon knight and a magic shooter all of a sudden? She was about to organize her words and describe List's glorious deeds. But she heard Levis also say in an excited tone, "Ha, not bad, not bad. I knew the Eagle Kingdom was nothing to be afraid of. Who can compete with Sapphire on the sea?" "Sir is very right. No one can compete with Sapphire on the sea now," Peggy echoed. Of course. Levis felt a sense of pride. He didn't know what his father and Levis had been so hesitant and worried about before, but he was the one who had the foresight. "It's a pity that we're a step too late. The family's fleet should have set off as soon as possible to get a share of the glory. Not too late, not too late. Levis was about to scold her with, "What do you know?" But Peggy had already said quickly, "Sapphire can achieve such a glorious victory under the glory of Sir List. It doesn't matter if the Tulip family's fleet comes or not. Sir List and Sir H.E. are enough." This flattery. Levis felt nauseous. This group of seemingly arrogant vampires were just a group of flattering clowns. In order to flatter, they even changed the glory of the night to the glory of Sir List, as if Sapphire's victory was all due to List's ability. However, the more Peggy spoke, the faster she felt. At the same time, congratulations, Sir Levis. You and Sir List have the same bloodline. It is really enviable. From now on, you are no longer an ordinary Sky Knight because behind you stands Sir List, the Dragon Knight. No, it is His Highness List. Whoosh. It was like a bolt of lightning piercing through the clear sky. Levis forcibly swallowed the words he was about to scold. His eyes widened, and after a full 5 seconds he said, "What did you say? Say it again." Peggy knew that Levis was shocked by the Dragon Knight. Because when she heard the news, she almost peed in her pants. She immediately explained excitedly, "The Eagle Kingdom dispatched 2 Dragon Knight to attack Sapphire. Sapphire Grand Duke was about to be killed. His Highness List rode a fire dragon into the sky, and His Highness Achilles assisted with magic." With a pious expression on her face, she said like a fanatic, "In the end, His Highness List killed the Dragon Knight Carl Lowe Violet, scared away the Dragon Knight Alonso Cyclamen, rescued the Dragon Knight Andrew Sapphire, and became the new overlord of the sea." Gulp. Levis swallowed a mouthful of saliva and said with difficulty, "Is what you said true?" Peggy nodded heavily, "Absolutely, the whole Oxfoot city is cheering for His Highness List." "Ha," Levis first hurriedly ha twice. After a moment, the expression on his face gradually changed from stiff to tangled, and finally into ecstasy. He laughed loudly, "Ha, Dragon Knight. My dearest brother is the Dragon Knight. I am the brother of the Dragon Knight." He laughed for a full quarter of an hour until the whole ship was boiling, and countless cheers of Dragon Knight sounded. Chapter 736. This chapter is Xiao Ruizi's kitchen. He still stood at the bow with his head held high, but his mood was completely different. Previously, Levis was full of resentment and infinite arrogance. His promotion to Sky Knight made him full of lofty aspirations and forgot the fear when List dominated him. Of course, he had never seen how List dominated those Sky Knights. Whether it was the actual battle between father and son, or against Marquis Wildwave, he had only heard about it. He did not know what was so great about the Ghostblade inheritance. He felt that he had become the #1 figure in the elder brother, and List was just the younger brother. But the news brought by Peggy Dawn instantly shattered his confidence. The so-called Sky Knight's confidence, compared with the deeply rooted power of the Dragon Knight, was so pathetic that it made him feel ridiculous. Compared with the Ghostblade inheritance that he had never seen, the Dragon Knight was more shocking. The Dragon Knight. Even though he had seen the port of Oxfoot Island where many ships were docked, Levis still could not calm down. His embarrassment only stayed in his mind for a few seconds before it was replaced by excitement and thrill. So what if he had the right to speak before? Now he had become the brother of the Dragon Knight. The Grand Duchy of Sapphire can do whatever I want. No one should have any objections, ha. This was another kind of arrogance. But Levis felt happier than when he was promoted to Sky Knight. When the ship docked and saw Viscount Jonas and other acquaintances who came to pick up the ship, Levis regained his calmness. Although he had great ambition but little talent, he had learned how to hide his true side and put on the most standard aristocratic disguise. Viscount Jonas. Sir Levis. After the polite greeting, he could not wait to ask, "Is the Battle of Dragon Slaying real?" Of course. As a follower of the Tulip family, he could naturally share the glory brought by the Dragon Knight. His Highness List's name has resounded throughout the sea. Do you see the sapphire dragon lying over there? If His Highness hadn't taken action, I'm afraid it would have died. The sapphire dragon was too tired and heavily injured. It had no choice but to sleep and rest near the port of Oxhoof City so that it could gather its strength to return to the dragon nest on Blue Dragon Island. Because of the sapphire dragon, the Grand Duke also stayed here. Dragon Knight. Levis looked at the sapphire dragon and suddenly thought of List's fire dragon. Where is the fire dragon? Where did List raise it? Raise the fire dragon in your body. In his body? We all saw that the fire dragon could turn into a ball of fire and enter His Highness List's body. Perhaps this is the strength of the elemental dragon. There's such a thing. Levis expressed his disbelief. He could not wait to see List, but List was not in Oxhoof City. He could only disappointedly stay in Oxhoof City and wait. He quickly integrated into the aristocratic society of Oxhoof City as the brother of the Dragon Knight, basking in the glory brought by the Dragon Knight. At the same time, List and Achi had arrived at the Dodo Island. Leo plunged directly into the crater of the volcano to enjoy the volcano's supreme magic he had condensed during this time. He also divided the area of influence. No dragon was allowed to set foot on the Dodo Island from halfway up the volcano. That was his territory and there was no room for negotiation. It was not worthwhile to argue with Leo in this regard. List just settled the light green gem dragon on the flat shore of the island. He did not know how long it would take for the light green gem dragon to recover. He could only wait slowly, visit it occasionally and feed it a batch of magic potions. After doing all this, he trained with Leo in the crater for half a day. Only then did he set off to return to Oxhoof Island, join his family, and then return to Coral Island to accept the mission. An 18-year-old Dragon Knight should receive cheers. I don't know why the Smoke Mission issued such a mission. I am usually a very low-key person and have no intention of deliberately showing off. So when he was about to return to the port of Ironhoof Island, because Achi did not want to stay in the crowded castle, she stayed on the sunset that came with the fleet and read alone. He naturally summoned the little fire dragon Leo and rode him slowly to the port. Finally, under the admiring eyes of Countless Night, he landed in front of the nameless castle where he was temporarily staying. He saw some familiar faces, Levis, Trick, Mary, Peggy and so on. The Tulip family's orders of chivalry arrived as planned. Of course, the Black Horse Island's orders of chivalry were also there. There were not many of them. List, who had long decided to watch from the sidelines, did not let Yevich and the others follow him. Instead, Commander Marcus and more than 60 Earth Knights were mixed among the Coral Island's orders of chivalry. Your Highness List. Your Highness List. The family's knight cheered. These were cries from the bottom of their hearts. From now on they were no longer ordinary knight, but knight followers of the Dragon Knight. Marquis Oxtail was discussing matters with the Grand Duke in Oxhoof Castle, so the nameless castle was temporarily led by Levis. The Sky Knight, who had just adjusted his mentality, was trying to make himself look normal, but when he felt the dragon's might and List's imposing manner at close range, his legs almost trembled. Leo, come back. List stretched out his hand and snapped his fingers. Leo suddenly turned into a ball of flame, and under the surprised and fearful gazes of the many new knight, he merged into List's body. Except for a few sparks that had not yet dissipated, there was no trace of the dragon. Leo's might also quickly dissipated, and the atmosphere of being strangled quickly returned to normal. List did not like to use means to release the might of the dragon, because releasing the might of the dragon did not have much meaning except for the scene. The dragon-slaying battle had already established enough majesty, so there was no need to pretend to be profound and use the might of the dragon to bait people like the Grand Duke did. List. Levis took a step forward, too excited to speak. It was not until the moment List landed on the dragon that he was completely relieved. The Tulip family really had a Dragon Knight. Mary, Marcus, and the others almost lost their balance. As a captured vampire, the Bronze Dragon Knight Alonso was a shadow that Mary could not get rid of. Although she had never seen him, he was still a knight who had betrayed the dragon. She often dreamed that she was found by the Black Knight family and faced the cruelest punishment, shivering in fear. But now, her master was also a Dragon Knight, and he was the Fire Dragon Knight who defeated Alonso. He also had the help of a magic shooter. Therefore, the mountain that had been pressing on Alonso's heart collapsed. Her whole body relaxed and she wanted to fly, but she restrained herself and hid behind the crowd. This was not the place for a blood servant. They were List's eyes in the dark, used to search for prey, not a few flying bats exposed to the light. She only muttered in her heart, "It is Mary's honor to be Prince List's eyes." List did not care about the psychological activities of others at all. He had long been used to being the center of attention with every move he made. "Brother, you're here. Let's go to the hall to talk." After a simple greeting, he walked into the castle with Levis. At the same time he did not forget to instruct, other than Viscount Jonas, Viscount Trick and Captain Marcus, everyone else can go do their own things. There is no need to crowd in the castle. Chapter 737. There was no fun in chatting with his brother Levis. Even if he was complimenting himself all the way, List still felt bored. So after a simple chat about the joy of riding a dragon, he went into the study and went about his own business. Marcus and Mary followed him into the study. Captain Marcus, I expect that a large number of Sapphire Knight will soon want to join the Black Horse Island Orders of Chivalry. I will leave this to you. Don't want a knight with bad conduct, a knight with mediocre talent, and an older knight. In short, choosing a knight requires both moral and talent. Lys said. Since he revealed his identity as a dragon knight and Achi revealed her identity as a magic shooter, it could be said that the founding of a nation was imperative. The second son of a noble and a civilian knight who could not progress in Sapphire would certainly see Lys as the greatest opportunity and want to become a veteran of a new country. But Lys was not a hungry lord, and any knight could become his follower. Better to have nothing than to have something shoddy. Anyway, I don't plan to build a nation in the short term. It's easier to gain loyalty by training a knight ourselves. Marcus replied in a deep voice. Please rest assured, Your Highness. Marcus will guard the knight selection checkpoint and select a knight who meets the standards you set. Although his expression seemed calm, his eyes were burning with excitement like fire, burning since he was still on the ship. A huge sense of unreality had always enveloped him. It was unimaginable that he had been a tutor to the Dragon Knight. And now his identity was the confidant of the Dragon Knight and the head of the Black Horse Island Orders of Chivalry. Perhaps one day the Orders of Chivalry would grow and the country would begin to build, and he would not be able to keep up with the great Dragon Knight, but he believed that his relationship with Lys would benefit him for life. For the time being, it was only the title of Lord Knight, but the future would never stop there. There is one more thing. Lys thought of something again. With the magic shooters by my side, there will definitely be a large number of mages pouring into the territory in the future. Chris is not good at organization management. I hope you can work with Chris, Paris, Charles, and Mary to come up with a unified management plan as soon as possible. Just like how a Dragon Knight could attract a large number of knight followers, a magic shooter would naturally be the faith of a mage. It's not just the Sapphire magicians who want to make a pilgrimage to Achi. After the news spreads, the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom, the Eagle Kingdom, and even more distant kingdoms should have magicians coming to make a pilgrimage. Lys did not like the stubborn side of magicians, but it was not impossible to make use of magicians. Anyway, with his and Achi's strength, if a magician dared to violate the territory's laws, they could directly obliterate him. The only thing they had to guard against was a dragon-slaying incident like the Goat Gathering. Therefore, it was very important to introduce unified management and strengthen the surveillance of magicians. After talking about the magicians, Lys left Mary alone and began to talk about the vampires. Alonso has fled and I don't know if those vampires are hiding. In any case, they are a disaster in Sapphire. Mary, you have to find them as soon as possible and inform me. Mary nodded. Your Highness, rest assured, the blood servants will never let the Black Knight family vampires escape from Sapphire. A night. The banquet was held in Oxhoof Castle. After the arrival of the Orders of Chivalry from the remote Coral Island, basically all the Orders of Chivalry of Sapphire's great nobles had arrived, and the scale of the banquet reached an unprecedented height. At the Grand Duke's table, in addition to Lys and Achi, the 7 marquises or the heirs of the marquises were allowed to attend. From Red Crab Island came Mesiro Longtaro. From Deep Throat Island came Warner Pineapple, the eldest son of Marquis Wallace. From Golden Island came Marquis Roderick Golden Wheat. From Red Maple City came Marquis Grindenton Red Maple Leaf. From Leather Island came Marquis Ramirez White Glutinous Rice. Together with Marquis Nesta Magnolia of Quicksand City, Marquis Oxtail Lee William Tulip, and eldest Prince Anthony, a total of 11 people were talking and laughing. If it weren't for His Highness Lyst's help, Sapphire's battle situation would have deteriorated. Your Highness, please accept my respect. Anthony raised his cup in a toast. The eldest prince's attitude changed very calmly. At the celebration banquet of Marquis Oxtail, he had the air of a lord everywhere and looked at Lys as if he was looking at his own follower. Not long after, he needed to look at Lys with admiration and no longer dared to put on any airs. The title of Your Highness was also changed to Lys. Eldest Prince, you are too polite. The sea is not a place where the Eagle Kingdom should intervene. Sapphire is also my hometown, so it is only right that I take action. Lys smiled and raised his cup. Anthony suddenly smiled and said, Your Highness Lys, you can just call me Anthony. Lys readily accepted the good advice and said, Yes, Anthony. He really did not want to call the other party eldest prince. He was clearly the son of a duke. It was a bit funny to have to deceive himself and come up with titles such as prince and princess in a rural island country like Sapphire. Of course, the nobles were thick-skinned, and other duchies basically did the same. After all, duchies were also countries. The Grand Duke sat in the main seat and watched his eldest son socialize enthusiastically with the marquises and Lys. He felt a little comforted in his heart. In any case, Sapphire had a qualified heir. He quietly gave his brother-in-law Nesta a look, and Nesta understood. He raised his cup and said in a clear voice, "This cup celebrates Sapphire's victory. May the glory of the night always bless Sapphire and everyone present." Everyone raised their cups together. After drinking, Nesta raised his cup again and said, "This cup celebrates His Highness Liszt and His Excellency Achilles Rhodes for turning the tide and becoming famous in the sea." Liszt raised his cup again and accepted everyone's salute. He was no longer a political novice, and he probably knew that the Grand Duke was just hinting to Nesta to flatter him and put him in a higher position, so that he would not easily have any ideas about Sapphire. Sapphire's strength was now extremely weak and could not withstand Liszt's challenge. Especially when the Sapphire Dragon was unconscious, it was almost at the mercy of others. Of course, it could not be ruled out that the Grand Duke was pretending again, and the Sapphire Dragon might just be pretending to sleep. After all, this kind of thing happened once. Naturally there would be a second and third time. In this way the dinner ended in a harmonious and lively atmosphere. However, the crowd did not disperse. The Grand Duke took advantage of the gathering and announced, "His Excellency Liszt has become a dragon knight and has decided to establish a country at the right time. I have also decided that Sapphire will fully support His Excellency Liszt in establishing a country. So in the preparatory stage, His Excellency Liszt needs a suitable identity." Liszt smiled and said nothing. He was happy to see the Grand Duke promote him. At least before the country was established, he did need a higher noble identity, a marquis. In the Eagle Kingdom, all dragon knights started as a marquis. Chapter 738. Although it was said to discuss Liszt's new identity, in fact, the Grand Duke had already prepared a plan. The Iron Hoof City and the Coral Island would be unified into a new territory, which would be Liszt's marquis fief, to pass this period of preparation for the establishment of a state. Liszt accepted the Grand Duke's good intentions. The Grand Duke, the Grand Prince, and the others were secretly relieved. They were now afraid that Liszt's appetite would be too big and difficult to satisfy. Therefore, the Grand Duke said with a smile, "Your Excellency Liszt, please give this territory a new name. I will immediately arrange for the court to prepare for your title." Even though it was an excessive territory, Liszt still seriously pondered for a moment before replying, "Let's call it the Flame Territory." He was a fire dragon knight. The fire dragon was the incarnation of the flame. The territory was symbolized by the fire dragon and was called the Flame Territory, constantly reminding others that this was the territory of the fire dragon knight. "Very well, I will confer upon you the title of Marquis of the Flame, and you will enjoy absolute jurisdiction over the territory." The Grand Duke waved his hand and decided. The Marquis of the Flame was nominally a subnoble of Sapphire, but in fact, Liszt would sign an offensive and defensive alliance contract with the Grand Duke, and the two would have an equal relationship. After the title was decided, the greater aristocrats came forward to congratulate him. "The Tulip family has two marquises, congratulations. Marquis of the Flame and Marquis of the Oxtail, congratulations. The knight is blessed by glory, the Tulip family is destined to prosper forever." Liszt smiled and thanked them one by one. He did not show too much arrogance. He had always been a gentle person. Perhaps aristocrats were divided into 3, 5, and 9 classes because of their status, but in his eyes, aristocrats and commoners were equally equal. They were all just ants, so what was the difference? All under the Dragon Knight were ants. Liszt had been very inflated these days. Great power often went to one's head. For example, when Levis was promoted to a Sky Knight, he was very inflated and proud. If Liszt's Dragon Knight identity had not poured cold water on him, who knew how insolent he would be now? However, no one could pour cold water on Liszt. He needed time to calm down. Fortunately, the 3 views of an adult soul allowed him to have enough self-control to overcome his inflated ego. With no time to waste with the nobles, Liszt spoke to Oxtail the moment he returned to the nameless castle. "Father, I'll need your help with the promotion of the Flame Dominion's title and the material assistance negotiations with the Grand Duke." William said calmly, "Don't worry, I'm here." "Then I'll have to trouble you, father. You are the pride of the Tulip family. Focus on your training as a Dragon Knight and increase your strength. Leave the other miscellaneous matters to me. I will definitely fight for the greatest benefits for you." Yes. It had to be said that with the help of his family, Liszt felt much more relaxed. Even though he had become a Dragon Knight, he still needed someone he could trust to help him build his family business. Now he had 2 dragons to raise, especially the light green gemstone dragon, which he needed to recuperate. He was afraid that the resources he needed would be astronomical. The light green gemstone mine was not fully developed yet, and he had to wait for another 2 years to mine it. He had to wait for the impact of the dragon-slaying war to pass. So he had to think of another way. He asked his brother Levis to call his uncle Mesiro over, and the family had a short meeting. "Father, uncle, I need to raise dragons. There is a huge shortage of resources and I can't raise dragons with the entire country's resources. Dragons can't give back a lot of resources, so I need to do business to accumulate resources." For this, William and Mesiro knew that Leo was an elemental dragon, not a gemstone dragon or a metal dragon. "List, if there is a need, the Taro family will be your strong support, and I can provide some resources to support you," Mesiro said on the spot. "Thank you for your kind intentions, uncle, but there is no need for that for now. I have a few ways to earn money. White paper and glass are both highly profitable industries. I plan to expand the scale of production and use the Tulip family and the Taro family's channels to sell them to the continent." "That's no problem. I believe the nobles of the continent can't resist the benefits of white paper and glass. In addition to white paper and glass, I am also exploring other profiteering industries. Basically, there are perfume, porcelain, and sea salt." "Sea salt?" Mesiro raised his eyebrows and asked. "Yes, seawater contains salt and requires special technology to extract it. I have basically mastered it and can mass-produce high-quality sea salt, which is higher quality than well salt and pond salt," List said proudly. Even in archipelago countries, Sapphire was still relatively short of salt. Because most of the salt at present was mineral salt, pond salt, well salt, and other land-produced salt, people still did not know to ask for it from the sea. There was a salt mine on Coral Island, so there was no shortage of salt. Therefore, List did not pay attention to this aspect before. When the territory started, he began to study seawater salt. In fact, the technology was very simple. With the cooperation of magicians, edible sea salt was soon produced. The seaside of Black Horse Island was not very suitable for salt drying, so it could not be promoted. However, the oxtail territory of the Oxtail Marquis had many flat, sunny seashores suitable for opening up salt pans. Red Crab Island would naturally have suitable salt pans. Once high-quality sea salt was produced, it would quickly impact the mainland salt market and bring huge profits to List. It must be known that the ancient salt merchants of China were all prominent tycoons. Even when the emperor came to Jiangnan, he would be warmly received by these big salt merchants. The huge profits of the salt industry can be seen. Robbery is far less profitable than doing business. According to List's estimation, if seawater was dried and sold on a large scale, the profits generated from monopolizing the salt market in the coastal area of the Steel and Iron Ridge Kingdom would be comparable to the annual revenue of the Grand Duchy of Sapphire. Of course, the Steel and Iron Ridge Kingdom may not open the salt market to List. It is more likely to cooperate with the great nobles of the kingdom. In any case, white paper, glass, porcelain, perfume, sea salt, and so on, there is no end to the money. Even if the technology is exposed in a few years, List estimates that he should have developed himself. At that time, who dares to block his way to make money, he will directly ride 3 or 5 dragons to their door. He was very confident in his heart. With the Smoke Mission's method of trapping dragons after a few years, it should not be difficult for me to ride 3 or 5 dragons. After all, he has already ridden 2 dragons, and there are still 3 dragon soul fruits in reserve. The production of sea salt made Lee William and Mesiro see the golden future, so their enthusiasm soared. Even Levis asked, "List, if Rolia and I can borrow the channels of the Golden Wheat family, can we also join your trade plan? If the channels are in the hands of you husband and wife, and not secretly controlled by the Golden Wheat family, I don't mind making money with you, brother. The mainland market is huge and there is no need to worry about too many people sharing the cake. Anyway, no matter who participates in the trade plan, the position is only an agent. In essence, it is to make money for List, and all the ownership of the technology is in his hands. Even if the Grand Duke wants to get involved in the future, List would welcome it." Chapter 739. This chapter is Book Friend 20180919064605873. Thank you for updating it. After pushing all the complicated social matters to the Oxtail Marquis, List planned to go to Heart Island to take a look at the crystal Cyathea and the huge pit that had been filled. But something unexpected happened. Mary Dawn Daybreak, who had just been investigating the vampires, quickly reported to him, "Your Highness, we've found traces of the Dark Knight family's vampires. There are about 2 purebloods and 5 mixed bloods lurking in a small city near Cowhoof City. They didn't run and even dared to spy on Cowhoof City. Don't they know I'm here? List narrowed his eyes. Maybe they don't know about the connection between you and the Black Knight family, Your Highness. They don't know that Tubert is already dead. I successfully triggered a response from the vampires of the Black Knight family by mimicking Tubert's blood magic. Tell me where they are now. Yes, Your Highness. List was a swift and decisive person. He had just learned the location of the Black Knight clan's vampires from Mary. Half an hour later, he had already brought a chi to where the vampires were hiding. It was a small city with a population of less than 5,000. The hybrids were scattered all over the city, but the pure bloods were gathered together. It's here. I just released blood magic and they responded, Mary pointed. The city was very dirty and the streets were even dirtier. List had to wear a mask in order to barely breathe. Chi, you stay outside. If you sense someone transforming into a bat and trying to escape, kill them directly. I'll go in and have a chat with the two pure bloods. It's best if we can avoid the trouble of fighting. But this idea didn't come to fruition. When they saw Mary and List behind her, the two pure bloods turned into bats and fled out of the house. Obviously they recognized List, the newly risen Dragon Knight. But it was too late to escape. List released his dragon's fighting aura and destroyed all the bats. In the end, the two pure bloods fell to the ground, heavily injured and dying. After asking Mary to dig out their hearts, he began to interrogate them. Name. The two of them wanted to resist, but their hearts were being squeezed. Between life and death they chose to live. Your Highness List, I am Horo's Black Knight. I am Pluto Black Knight. What about the other Black Knight vampires? List had heard Mary mention the two of them before. They were both foreign purebloods who were transformed from human potential mages. The vampires of the family have already retreated from Sapphire, leaving only the two of us to keep a close eye on what is happening here. Tell me what you know about the invasion of the Eagle Kingdom. We don't know much. The Black Knight family is just His Highness Alonso's vampiric servants, responsible for gathering information. However, the invasion of Sapphire is a plan that His Highness Alonso has been planning for many years. Our original mission was to cooperate with the kingdom's orders of chivalry to complete the cleanup of Blue Dragon Island. Obviously, Alonso was planning to wipe out the Sapphire family in one fell swoop after winning the dragon-slaying battle. Unfortunately, it was the Eagle Kingdom that suffered a crushing defeat. Seeing that the situation was not good, the vampires quickly slipped away, leaving only Horos and Pluto to monitor Cowhoof City. However, the two of them were a little timid and did not dare to easily appear in Cowhoof City. After all, the Grand Duke and the Sapphire Dragon were still stationed in Cowhoof City. They could not get anything out of them. List waved his hand. Mary, I'll leave these two to you. As for the hearts of the 5 mixed bloods, you will also take care of them. Mary unconsciously licked her lips. With the growth of the blood servants, her power would inevitably grow as well. This made her excited. Your Highness, please rest assured that Mary will manage the blood servants properly. There is no Black Knight family here, only Dawn and Dawn. Mary was a woman with means, and her strength had also increased to that of a pure blood. He believed that she could tame Horos and Pluto. If she really could not tame them, at worst he would just kill the two purebloods and use their hearts to breed new purebloods. As long as he had the heart of a vampire, he was not afraid of the vampire betrayal. Of course, if he really encountered an external force that he could not resist, no means could guarantee loyalty. What he had to do was to guarantee Mary's loyalty, and through Mary, guarantee the loyalty of the other vampires. This was probably what Alonso was doing. With the loyalty of the patriarch of the Black Knight family, the other vampires were free to do whatever they wanted. In any case, low-level vampires were cannon fodder. Death or capture was not a big loss. At worst, he could just breed them again. By the way, Mary, I have something for you to deal with. Please instruct me, Your Highness. I have the address of the Eagle Kingdom here, Burning Mountain. Send a blood servant to the Eagle Kingdom and draw out the specific location of Burning Mountain. In addition, ask the residents around Burning Mountain about the legend of the Wyvern Phoenix. Be careful and don't expose your identity and intentions at will. Rest assured, Your Highness. Mary will immediately arrange for the blood servant to carry out the task. Regarding the defeat of the Eagle Kingdom in this dragon-slaying battle, don't forget to find out the reaction of all parties. The more detailed, the better. If there is any important news, immediately send it back. Yes, Your Highness. The plan to conquer the Wyvern and Phoenix at Burning Mountain was a big matter that List was bound to win. After all, he had seen many dragons in his life, but he had never seen a wyvern. He had not even seen a superworld of Warcraft or a high-level dragon beast. He really wanted to know if the wyvern had the bloodline of World of Warcraft. Logically speaking, dragons could infect small beasts in World of Warcraft. However, the wyvern was very strong. Even if it could not defeat the dragon, it would not be easily infected by the dragon. Moreover, high-level World of Warcraft would run away when they saw the dragon. Why would they stay and let the dragon infect them? Perhaps these doubts could be solved after capturing the possible existence of the wyvern and phoenix. At the very least, the fire attribute wyvern and phoenix could also give him and Leo a big supplement. Back then, Leo, who was still a fire seed, relied on devouring the magic power of the phoenix feather to successfully hatch into the magic form of the little fire dragon. There were not many changes on the Island of Souls. The light emerald mine was still being nurtured, and the crystal cyathea was still growing. So far, no crystal cyathea had grown into a true pure crystal tree. There were also no signs of germination in the big pit that had been filled with soil. Of course, only 2 days had passed, so naturally nothing could be seen. When he returned to Cowhoof City from the Island of Souls, he was surprised to find that the Sapphire Dragon had woken up. The Grand Duke was preparing to dismiss the Orders of Chivalry and announce the end of the war. The Tulip family's Orders of Chivalry and the fleet were also ready to return to Coral Island. Thus the last banquet came to an end. Early the next morning, the fleet that crowded the port of Cowhoof City left one after another. Lys did not ride a dragon or a seashell. Instead, he and Achi quietly stayed on the sunset. Sailing with the wind, they enjoyed a rare 4 days of drifting on the sea. During these 4 days, Achi would disappear for a few hours. She would go to the Island of Souls to observe and record the growth of the crystal cyathea, or to the Fairy Island to record the condition of the light emerald stone dragon. Lys, on the other hand, calmly read the secretary's notes. Occasionally he would summon the little fire dragon Leo and fly into the clouds to cultivate for a while. He was summarizing the secret technique of the Fire Dragon Knight's Dragon Chi. During the 4-day voyage, he successfully researched the first move of the Fire Dragon Knight Dragon Chi secret technique. This move, which he named Dragon Slash, made use of Leo's quick turn while flying at high speed and the dragon spear to draw a slashing trajectory. Dragon Slash. In the clouds, Leo swiftly turned around. Lys took advantage of this opportunity to brandish Thunder Fury. The tip of the spear condensed with Berserk Dragon Chi and drew a fiery red crescent moon. The crescent moon moved at high speed in the clouds. When it came into contact with the water vapor, it made crackling noises similar to thunder and lightning. It flew for more than 200 meters before slowly dissipating. Chapter 740. The great offensive power of the Dragon Slash greatly improved Lys' strength. This was just one of the countless inspirations in his mind. There were still many powerful offensive and defensive ideas brewing. Unknowingly, 4 days had passed. The Coral Island was in sight. Drops of rain began to fall from the overcast sky. Without an umbrella, Lys and Lee Williams stood side by side at the bow of the ship. The father and son chatted in the drizzle. "We are almost home." Lee Williams suddenly felt a lot of emotions. He shook his head and sighed. "I originally thought that the title of Marquis was the pinnacle of my life. I didn't expect you to bring me so many surprises, making the family rise from a great aristocrat to a dragon-raising family. How glorious." Lys said as if it was a matter of course. "The dragon-raising family is just the beginning. More glory is yet to come." Seeing Lys' attitude, Lee William laughed involuntarily. "Your development has been too smooth, that's why you don't feel the nobility of a dragon-raising family. Going from a serf family to a commoner family is a huge hurdle. Going from a commoner family to a minor aristocrat is even more of a moat. Going from a minor aristocrat to a greater aristocrat was yet another huge chasm. These hurdles that needed to be crossed were enough to stop 99% of the people in this world. Only the lucky 1 in 10,000 could enjoy the glory and nobility of a greater aristocrat. However, none of this could compare to the disparity between a greater aristocrat and a dragon-raising family. There were countless greater aristocrats in this world, but the number of dragon-raising families didn't exceed 200. Take the Grand Duchy of Sapphire for example. Over the past 150 years, great aristocrats had risen and fallen, but the only dragon-raising family was the Sapphire family. If not for your unexpected rise, perhaps the Sapphire dragon would have aged and the Sapphire family would have declined, and a second dragon-raising family would not have been born. The more Lee Williams spoke, the more he felt it was unreal. He couldn't imagine how many Night Glory's blessings were needed for a dragon knight and a magic shooter to be born in the Tulip family. As a commoner family in the early days of the founding of the nation, Their ancestors narrowly escaped death on the battlefield and barely became a minor aristocrat. Their descendants spent more than 100 years to barely become a greater aristocrat. In the blink of an eye they became a dragon-raising family. Father, you have to adapt as soon as possible. The family will be very busy in the future. I know. William Lee was just hypocritically sighing with emotion. In fact, he was very proud of himself. We will soon reach the port. Do you want to summon Leo and let the people of the Coral Island experience the inconceivable might of the fire dragon? List shook his head. This is too deliberate and not steady enough. When we return to Tulip Castle, I'll summon Leo and let my family meet him. William Lee coughed and didn't know what to say. Every time they returned to the port of Oxfood Island, List would ride on Leo to show off his imposing manner. Why didn't he say that it was too deliberate? Why did he end up with such a result when he helped him come up with a plan? Preposterous. However, since List didn't want to show off, he couldn't force him either. The conversation between father and son fell into an awkward silence. After a while. At this moment, the Coral City's port could be described as a sea of people. In addition to the knights stationed on the Coral Island, there were also a large number of civilians. They all stretched their heads out, looking forward to the return of the Dragon Knight. Almost no one here had ever seen a dragon, so they were all eager to see a dragon. Later, when facing their children and grandchildren, they would have something to talk about. Besides, they could also meet an archwizard. For the commoners, the archwizard title was far inferior to the Dragon Knight, because the commoners only knew that the knight was the ruler. Unfortunately, today List wasn't interested in showing off. He calmly followed orders of chivalry to the port, and then quickly entered the family's carriage. Under the escort of orders of chivalry, he headed for Tulip Castle. When he arrived at the fork in the road between Coral City and Tulip Castle, he saw Madame Penelope and the others standing in the rain, looking forward. He was somewhat absent-minded. This was his fourth triumphant return. The first battle on the Ironhoof Island, the second battle of the Expansion Order, and the third battle of the Dragon-Slaying War. The troops that greeted him were more magnificent than the last, corresponding to his identity every time he returned triumphantly, an elite Earth Knight with a bright future, the youngest Sky Knight, and the second strongest expert in the Grand Duchy. And now the Dragon Knight, the new overlord of the sea. The different treatment of the family was admittedly a very obvious display of snobbery, but List enjoyed this snobbery. It truly confirmed his continuous growth and progress in the past few years. Lee William was the first to get off the carriage and strode towards Madame Penelope. "Mother, I made you worry." However, Madame Penelope simply nodded, then went to greet List, who got off the carriage and gave List a big hug. The glorious son of the Tulip family, the family's Dragon Knight, after receiving the message, "I have been looking forward to your return every day." Such a warm hug, List was a little helpless, so he just smiled and responded, "Grandmother." After the hug, Madame Penelope looked at Achi, who was beside List, and also gave her a reserved hug. "Achi, good child." Achi smiled calmly. She did not have the warmth of a family member. She had always been indifferent to humans apart from List. She could not even be warm to Isis, who was a siren, let alone humans whom she was not familiar with. If it wasn't for List, she would have directly avoided this hug. After Madame Penelope hugged the Dragon Knight and Archwizard one by one, she stared at List. "Then, my proud and great Dragon Knight, your dragon is in your body?" "Yes, grandmother. I actually just hugged a dragon." "You can say that." List faintly smiled, then immediately called out in his mind. Leo, who was ready to go, suddenly rushed out of his body and turned into raging flames. When the flames were extinguished, a 20-meter-long red-black fire dragon with a 20-meter-long wingspan soared into the sky and flew towards the mountain on which the Tulip Castle was located not far away. It landed on the mountaintop and looked at the group of people at the foot of the mountain with a pair of eyes brimming with an evil spirit from afar. The crowd was in an uproar. Leo's flashy appearance shocked everyone. Looking at the fire dragon on the mountaintop in the distance, many people were so excited that their faces were flushed. List helped the frightened Madame Penelope up and said, "Grandmother, let's go back to the castle first." Okay. Madame Penelope was trembling a little. She had practiced Qi for a period of time when she was young, but she didn't succeed, so she only had the identity of an ordinary person. The glimpse of dragons might just now really stimulated her gradually declining body. In fact, it was in consideration of Madame Penelope's body that List told Leo to stay away from the crowd. Otherwise, if Leo's dragon's might were to be unleashed, perhaps many people with poor health would directly faint. If he released dragon's might for a while longer, even the Earth Knight would collapse. Even so, Madame Penelope still felt a little uncomfortable. Nearby, Rolia, who was welcoming Richard in her arms, burst into tears. A child who wasn't even a year old couldn't withstand the oppression of Dragon's might. But he was also lucky to have felt Dragon's might at such a young age. Just like that. The group of people stared at the fire dragon on the mountaintop while walking towards the Tulip Castle. After a while, the news spread throughout the Coral City as if it had grown wings. Everyone knew that the Dragon Knight of the Tulip family had returned, riding an incredibly terrifying fire dragon. Chapter 741. After entering the Tulip Castle, the family was happy and harmonious. List became a Dragon Knight and Achi became a magic shooter. They were both strong enough to shock the sea and were members of the Tulip family. Even Levis had successfully advanced to a Sky Knight. How could they not be happy? The topic continued to revolve around List. Women such as Madame Penelope, Madame Marie, Loria, and Elvira were unscrupulously complimenting List, making Levis feel cold. He had fantasized many times that he was promoted to a Sky Knight and how pleased his family would be. However, the truth was that his Sky Knight was just a green leaf used to set off the extraordinary red flower List. Fortunately, List was not a talkative person. After briefly describing the process of riding a dragon and satisfying everyone's curiosity, he stopped talking, allowing Levis to successfully seize back many opportunities to dominate the topic. While Levis was talking about how he was promoted to a Sky Knight, List quietly called out the smoke mission. Mission: the wonderful battle of the Dragon Slayer and the difficult choice of the Fruit Tree of Soul have consumed too much of your energy. Although your body is still strong, your spirit has long been exhausted. Why not relax and enjoy the cheers that an 18-year-old Dragon Knight should receive? Reward: a sprite worm. The mission has not changed. That is to say, my journey of enjoying cheers is not over yet? List silently calculated in his heart, probably still missing the cheers of the territory. From the cheers of the nobles of Bullhoof Island, to the cheers of the family of Coral Island, to the cheers of the people of Black Horse Island, it was about the same routine. In fact, it was very enjoyable to receive cheers at first. However, as he gradually listened to it more and more, especially when it was repeated every day, he felt annoyed. He just wanted to end it as soon as possible and resume his previous low-key and peaceful life. However, Marcus had already returned to the territory with orders of chivalry from Black Horse Island to prepare for his triumphant return. He was destined to receive a grand cheer. Today I will temporarily rest in Tulip Castle. After the lunch banquet, he finally had some peace and quiet. He stayed in the study and quietly read for a while until Achi came back in the afternoon. Achi did not eat lunch in the castle. She was in a hurry to go to the Heart Island to do the experiment. She did not like to attend human banquets. The hypocritical social interaction made her feel uncomfortable. She took out the crystal cyathea that had been cut into several pieces from her spatial ring. Big brother, Achi brought back a completely crystallized crystal cyathea. Caressing the smooth and translucent trunk of the crystal cyathea, List asked, "Have you made any progress?" A fully crystallized crystal cyathea isn't much different from an ordinary crystal, but it has a special property. It can continue to replenish mana. Achi analyzed seriously. In other words, the crystals produced by the crystal cyathea can be recharged repeatedly. Repeated infusions? List's eyes lit up. In other words, magic items made from this crystal can be used repeatedly. Theoretically, yes, but we need to verify it accurately. Then let's first make a batch of mana equipment to test the properties of the crystal cyathea. Okay. Achi nodded obediently, then busied herself with her magic experiments. This made List feel very emotional. Ever since he had Achi, it seemed like he hadn't done any research for a long time. Other than focusing on practicing the Dragon Knight's Chi manual, there was nothing else for him to do. He felt that his brain had become idle, but it was quite comfortable. He didn't want to work so hard. He even wanted to further liberate himself. Maybe when the mages from all over the world come to visit Achi and restrain them, I can form a guild of magic and let Achi lead it. It'll be structured according to the Academy of Sciences, and specialize in magic research in this world. This was a matter for the future. He took out his notebook and entered the Guild of Magic into his to-do list. This notebook that he carried with him was filled with all kinds of to-do lists, from the big ones like Light Dragon Plan, to the small ones like Black Nightshade. Everything was recorded in detail. Occasionally he would flip through it to see if there were any items that he had missed, and remind himself to do them. After running the territory for almost 3 years, he probably understood that he was not a management talent who was good at planning the overall situation. He usually did what he wanted, so he could only use a small notebook to replace the overall plan, and try to make up for the loopholes in the plan by checking for omissions. Then he played the role of his followers to maintain the operation of the territory's government. Finally, the effect was good. The population of the territory exceeded 100,000, and they could still live and work in peace and contentment. There were no more cases of serfs starving to death or freezing to death. After putting down the crystal Cyathea, Hachi did not stay long and hurried to the Dodo Island to record the condition of the light green gem dragon. The dragon, which was swallowed by the fruit tree of soul, was still in a coma, and it was unknown when it would wake up. The next day, List rode the little fire dragon Leo and left Tulip Castle. As it grew, Leo's flying speed became faster and faster, and it was already much faster than the running speed of the chocobo Loki. After arriving at Flower Town, he stopped for a while to meet with the administrative officer Isaiah, and listen to the other excitedly talk about the development of the town in the past few days. Amid cheers and flattery, he flew back into the blue sky and white clouds, crossed the sea and flew straight to Black Horse Island, landing in an open space near Thorn Castle. Roar! Leo let out a majestic dragon roar, and the dragon's might spread rapidly, hitting all humans and animals within a few kilometers. The closer the distance, the stronger the dragon's might. The crowd that greeted List in front of Thorn Castle soon fell to the ground, foaming at the mouth. These were ordinary servants of Thorn Castle, and it was difficult for their bodies to withstand the oppression of the dragon's might. Leo, put away your dragon's might. List scolded loudly. He did not plan to let Leo release his dragon's might. After all, the people here were all his subjects. However, Leo took the initiative to scare the ants in his eyes and show off his majesty as a fire dragon. Roar! Leo put away his dragon's might and directly crawled on the ground as if he was sleeping. In fact, he was using the Dragon Heart code to communicate with List. 20 potions, 30 roast cows, don't forget, I want to enjoy them today. Aren't you afraid of dying? I can eat as much as you want. The environment here is too bad, I hate sleeping on the ground, hurry up and build me a mountain, I like to sleep on the top of the mountain, the ants can only look up to me. There are no mountains on Black Horse Island, I will build you a 100-meter-high rock building in the future, you can lie on it. He communicated with Leo in his mind. On the surface, List shook his red, black and gold-edged tricolor cloak, and slowly walked towards the castle under the awe of the territorial knight, officials and civilians. The front of the castle was crowded with people, Gort, Marcus, Yevich, Paris, Charles, Chris, Blair, Emily, everyone stared at their lord with fiery eyes. The great dragon knight, List Tulip. Of course. Aroyd's Truth, who was behind List, was also the focus of attention. Fire Dragon, who was sleeping in the open space, was also the focus of attention. Chapter 742. This chapter is Sharp Little Teeth, Wanzhangjiao. Wow! The moment he stepped into the Thorn Castle, there was a familiar cry in his heart. Then he saw the Thorn sprite Ella flying down the stairwell and directly into the arms of List. This bad-tempered little elf was probably the most emotional of all the little elves. Has Ella been well behaved these days? List caught the palm-sized Ella and asked Butler Carter with a smile. Since the birth of the Thorn medicine, Ella's value has jumped to the same level as the giant algae sprite. Coupled with his own preference, Ella has a special status in the castle. Master, Ella has been quite well behaved these days. Except for the daily scolding of the sprites in other rooms, she has not been too grumpy. But because she can't enter other rooms, she is probably a little stuffy, so she often runs to the thorn plantation and randomly sows thorn seedlings. Butler Carter replied seriously. But under the calm expression, his body trembled slightly with excitement. As long as he thought that his master turned out to be a great dragon knight, the loyal old butler could not help but be excited. When arranging to go to the countryside town, he never thought that he could become the butler of the Dragon Knight. Not only him, but the first group of servants, such as Mrs. Morrison and Mrs. Abbey, were all too excited to sleep when the news came the day before yesterday. Even after 2 days, they still could not calm their excitement. That's good. List rubbed Ella's head. The scattered thorn seedlings should be carefully screened and eradicated to prevent magic potions or mutated new types of thorns. The insect protection team cooperates with the magicians of the Wizard Tower. Every thorn seedling has been carefully investigated to ensure that no new types of thorns are missed. Yes. List nodded. The magicians of the Wizard Tower, under his control, have begun to turn to the scope of basic magic research. The relationship between sprites and plants is the key category of basic magic mechanics. Scientific management, scientific farming, and he believed that sooner or later, the secret of elven breeding could be found. Wow. Ella cried to show that she was helping with the farming, not playing. I see, little one. Lys smiled. He always felt that Ella's emotions were more abundant and vivid than other elves. He didn't know if it was because of the relationship between the feelings, or because of its more distinct personality. In short, Ella was the one that was different. Go play by yourself in the worm room first, I'll play with you later, Lys said as he handed it to the manservant Thomas and put it back in the worm room upstairs. After a while, the important knight and officials of the territory all gathered in the conference room. The servants poured the tea. Lys cut to the chase and said, "As you can see, I am a dragon knight and Achilles is a magic shooter. Both of us stand at the pinnacle of power in this world. For the time being, my title is the Marquis of the Flame, and my fief is the Flame Territory. Legally, I have jurisdiction over Coral Island, Black Horse Island, and Ironhoof Island and Ironhoof City." Everyone looked at the Lord and waited for him to continue. Lys paused and continued, "But all this is just a transition. It won't be long before I find a new archipelago in the sea and build a new country. And everyone work hard and do your tasks. In the new country you will all be founding heroes. We are willing to drive for your highness." The crowd shouted. Even Chris, who did not swear allegiance, shouted with the crowd. This unprecedented dragon-slaying war completely established the foundation of List. No kingdom on the continent would be able to launch another dragon-slaying war. Therefore, the founding of the country was irresistible. No one could refuse the honor of personally participating in the building of a new country. Chris could not refuse the opportunity to become a court magician. Yevich could not refuse the possibility of becoming a founding noble. Gort and Marcus had served as List's tutors, and they could not refuse the glorious future. He was satisfied with the resounding response of his subordinates. List said indifferently, "The future is glorious. The glory of the night will always be with me, and the glory will be sprinkled on everyone here. In the future we will all fight for the establishment of the new country, but the most urgent task is to maintain the stability of the territory and slowly take over the Flame Territory." Coral Island had been nominally in fief to List, but it had not passed the 5-year harvest period and would not be easily transferred for the time being. Ironhoof City of Ironhoof Island, however, could be taken over immediately. It was a large city with a population of more than 150,000 people. It was the second largest city in the Grand Duchy of Sapphire, second only to the Blue Dragon City under the jurisdiction of the court. However, the current population of Ironhoof City was only about 100,000. With the destruction of the Bull family, the aristocracy and freedmen were largely lost, and only serfs were still bound to the land. The loss of a large number of craftsmen would inevitably lead to the decline of Ironhoof City. In particular, the output of the soil around Ironhoof City would be greatly reduced after the elves were taken back by the Sapphire family. However, with Ironhoof City's geographical location in the center of Ironhoof Island, it still had great trade potential. Of course, even though Ironhoof City was the second largest city in the Sapphire family, Lys still did not like it. The city's hygiene was not good, and it was very difficult to improve it. He also had no intention of improving it. In a few years, the city would sooner or later be returned to the Sapphire Grand Duke. He only intended to use Ironhoof City as a transit point for trade in his territory and renovate the Bull Castle, which was second only to the Blue Sky Palace. The huge and magnificent Bull Castle barely fit his status. In addition to taking over the territory, the knight who will come to seek refuge also needs to be carefully selected. Only those who have both ability and integrity will have a place in the Flame Territory. The knight who will seek refuge with the Orders of Chivalry will be led by Marcus, the knight who will seek refuge with the officials will be led by Gort, and the knight who has been screened will be led by Paris and Charles. The four of them got up one after another to express their understanding. Then there are the magicians on a pilgrimage. It can be foreseen that in the future, there will be many magicians staying in the Flame Territory. I intend to establish a guild of magic that will govern the magicians under their real names. Achilles will be the president and Chris will be the vice president. Every magician must be included in the supervision. Chris nodded solemnly, "Please rest assured, Your Highness." Finally, there is the nautical exploration to find new islands. Yevich, I will directly purchase a few fast court sailboats from the Sapphire family. You and Captain Costo will work together to train more sailors as soon as possible. After the new year, we will set off to explore the south of the Cerulean Sea and search for possible islands. Yevich immediately replied, "Yes, Your Highness." His voice was sonorous and powerful, as if it contained endless power. The fallen swordsman who once had nothing to lose could no longer be seen. Becoming a follower of a dragon knight was the most magnificent turnaround he had ever had in his life. Chapter 743. He sent the others away. He left Gort and Blair alone for a simple reason. You have to hand over your jobs as consultants and administrative officers of the port town as soon as possible. I will let you work in the Iron Shoe City. Gort will temporarily act as a consultant of the Iron Shoe City, and Blair will temporarily act as an administrative officer of the Iron Shoe City. Gort heard this and replied with a trembling voice, Your Highness, Gort swears loyalty to Your Highness. Blair choked, swears loyalty to Your Highness and will never let Your Highness down. Well, the Iron Shoe City is a large city with 100,000 people. This is a challenge for you. If you do well, you will take on greater responsibilities in the future. If you don't do well, I don't need to say more, do I? List was not optimistic about the two of them, whether in terms of means or courage. They were probably competent as consultants and administrative officers of a small city, but it was really dangerous to be responsible for a large city with 100,000 people. But unfortunately, List had no one at his disposal, so he could only arrange it like this for the time being. After the Flame Lord had taken over, he would slowly adjust it. What if he lacked money, people, and elves? Rob. He discussed with the Sapphire Grand Duke and issued a few more expansion orders to rob the Eagle Kingdom. When Gort and Blair left, he had already planned how to arrange the robbery plan. The fire dragon was an evil dragon. It did not produce, but its nature was to rob. As a fire dragon knight, he naturally could not abandon this talent, and had to develop it skillfully. The Eagle Kingdom's dragon knight was dead, and the dragon was kidnapped by List halfway. It was at its weakest. Once it showed any signs of fatigue, List would definitely not let it go. After all, the Eagle Kingdom had mastered navigation technology and could rob the benefits of the sea at any time, so it must be attacked. He wanted to let the nobles of the Eagle Kingdom understand that besides Sapphire, only he, List, could dominate the sea. Speaking of which, Marquis Nuteo's letter should have already been delivered to his family. The representatives of the Yuhua Stone family should be here with the great elves to ransom him. If I knew this would happen, I would have captured a few more nobles before the dragon-slaying war started. Perhaps the elves' hands would have gone soft from receiving them. Unfortunately, before the battle started, he held the attitude of watching from the sidelines and did not make a move. After the battle started, he was too embarrassed to make a move because of his noble status as a dragon knight. While he was thinking, smoke slowly appeared in front of him. Mission completed. Reward, 1 thorn sprite worm. After receiving the cheers of his subjects, the mission was finally judged to be completed. Oh, not bad, not bad. Another thorn worm. List originally thought that the smoke mission was lackluster and only took out a sprite worm to fool him. He did not expect it to be a thorn sprite worm. A thorn worm could produce about 100 acres of auxiliary thorns, which could be used in a ratio of 1 to 3 with the magic potion. This was especially true for the Earth Knight and the Sky Knight who trained in Qi. The value of the supplementary medicine was far greater than the potion. The value of a thorn sprite worm was comparable to that of an ordinary sprite. At present, there were 2 auxiliary medicines in the territory, the auxiliary medicine Black Nightshade and the auxiliary medicine Thorns, both of which lacked sprites to be planted. This was also a reflection of Ella's importance. Immediately, the smoke in front of him changed and new serpentines appeared. Mission: you have noticed that the thorn sprite Ella is different. As the number of sprites in the territory continues to increase, it is inevitable to neglect Ella's emotions. However, the grumpy Ella is not willing to be a supporting role. It is working hard to advance. Please provide Ella with a new type of thorns. Reward: a greater sprite. List was shocked. He felt that happiness had come too suddenly. The mission is Ella's endeavor, and the reward is a greater sprite. Does this mean that Ella is about to evolve into a greater sprite? He had not seen a sprite evolve into a greater sprite, but he knew the process of evolution from a lesser sprite to a greater sprite. The greater sprite of the tulip family, Xiangxiang, evolved from a tulip sprite. The evolution process was not complicated. The sprite evolves into a lesser sprite. It needs to go through a fat pupa period, and then break the cocoon and become a butterfly flying out of the dead skin. The lesser sprite evolves into a greater sprite, but it only experiences a period of wilting. If it cannot overcome it, it will suffer a great loss of vitality or even directly die. However, after overcoming it, it can grow into a greater sprite. Its body will gradually grow from the size of a palm to the size of a baby. Its spiritual force and IQ will also greatly increase, and its vocal cords will fully develop and it can learn to speak. Immediately. Immediately. Go now. List waved the smoke mission and directly mobilized territorial officials to find new varieties of thorns. At the same time, he contacted Tulip Castle and asked Oxtail Marquis to mobilize his contacts to find new varieties of thorns. Even if he searched all of Sapphire, he must find different varieties of thorns to provide Ella with evolutionary pheromones. Ella was called over. List was happy but also a little nervous. This mission was risky. Although there was the shelter of the smoke mission, he should not fail, but who could guarantee that the result of the tulip worm would be repeated? Starting today, say Ella for a while before going to bed every day to enhance the subconscious control of the power of destiny. In any case, once Ella evolves into a greater sprite, she can live for 200 years. It should be enough to accompany him for 200 years. What's more, after Ella evolves, the planting area of auxiliary thorns can be greatly increased, and the production of magic potions in the territory will also double. Wow! Ella, you must work hard. Putting Ella on his shoulder, List began to patrol his castle, caring for every sprite and sprite worm, and went to the underwater worm room to tease the giant algae sprite Parker. The great sprite Parker did not live in the underwater worm room, but in the small underwater castle that Virginia Truth built for it at the mouth of the canal. It liked to be alone, and even its own kind of sprite hated it, let alone other sprites. After calling for a long time, it swam over lazily and ate the jade powder that List sprinkled on it. This great sprite was as narcissistic and poisonous as ever. List, quickly throw away Ella, a clown sprite, ugly. Wow! A clown that can't talk, really ugly. Parker grinned disdainfully, and his fangs were very eye-catching. Only List and Parker are handsome. Wow! Ella raised her hand and a green light appeared. Parker reacted very quickly, and also raised his hand with a yellow-brown light. Looking for a fight? All of you stop. List slightly stirred up the dragon's fighting spirit and defeated the two rays of light. Parker, you are indeed handsome, but you have to keep a low profile. Parker has been very low-key. Parker floated on the water and said, Parker was the most handsome, but in order to take care of your mood, you are barely counted. Oh. List listened and left the underwater worm room without looking back. He really had nothing in common with Parker. Before leaving, he did not forget to teach the sprite on his shoulder. Ella, when you evolve into a great sprite, remember not to learn from Parker or you will lose me. Chapter 744. After lunch. List began his inspection of the territory. The first place he went to was the thorn plantation. After several inspections, it was easy to find a thorn that had already bred a sprite worm, and it was a fast-growing poisonous thorn. No matter what kind of thorn sprite worm it was, it could be planted with potions. List ordered the worm protection team to take care of the breeding thorn sprite worm. List was too lazy to continue his inspection. The news that he had become a dragon knight had spread like rain to every corner of the island. Everywhere he went, there were bound to be a large number of serfs who were not concentrating on their work and peeking at him. The officials all had dog noses, frantically looking for excuses to get close to List, even just to see the great dragon knight lord from a distance. This situation was difficult to calm down in a short time. The dragon knight was too shocking. Everyone grew up listening to the story of the dragon knight when they were young. Even the lowest serfs had dreams of becoming a dragon knight when they were young. In all knight novels, 99% of the protagonists will ride a dragon. Even if you can't ride a dragon, you have to at least kill a dragon. Annoying. List rode the chocobo Loki and flew to Thorn Castle. After a while he returned to the castle. He felt that there was nothing to do urgently, so he simply trained the blizzard beasts for a while. In peacetime, the blizzard beasts were basically moving rock mines. Every day, a retainer knight would take them to a special stone square, allowing the blizzard beast to release magic at will in the stone square, consuming so much energy that it wanted to overflow. Woof woof. Dosen had grown up and was no longer as enthusiastic as when he was a child. He began to have the majesty of an intermediate World of Warcraft. However, the uncontrollable wagging of its tail betrayed its steadiness. The 8 little ones lined up behind Trembling Woods, maintaining the strict discipline of the battlefield. This blizzard beast squad, under List's training, was like a pack of wolves. Dosen Rockthorn. List pointed, Dosen quickly opened his mouth, and a huge rockthorn pierced out from a designated position in the distance. Their cooperation was still skillful, but he sighed softly. Unfortunately, my battlefield is no longer a knight's charge or a siege. You can't continue to shine by following me. Thinking of this, He ordered the retainer knight behind him, "Go find Emily." "Yes, your highness." The 12-year-old girl arrived quickly. She was wearing a leather armor that was almost worn out. The do qi in her body was already very abundant, and her skin had been tanned to a healthy wheat color. Although her body hadn't developed much, her tall stature still showed a valiant and heroic bearing. Her delicate and exotic face was quite charming. "Your highness, how's your cultivation recently?" Compared to the speed of training on the battlefield, the efficiency of normal training is too low. Emily's face was filled with a sense of urgency. The count she admired and chased after had become a dragon knight, while she was still an elite earth knight. She felt that the gap between them was getting bigger and bigger, and so was the pressure. She had completely forgotten that she was only a 12-year-old girl who had only trained for a year and a half. To be able to have such achievements was enough to show disdain for all of Sapphire, and even the kingdom of the continent. Don't always think about improving your strength. A balance between work and rest is the best way to train. Emily knows it's just, stop. Liszt directly raised his hand to stop Emily from speaking. It was nothing more than worrying about the impact of her menstrual period. It was a little awkward for a little girl to talk about her menstrual period all day. However, looking at the girl's stubborn expression, he still admired her. If he had the girl's hard work, perhaps he would have created a set of Fire Dragon Knight, Dragon Do Chi secret manual. Inexplicably, he thought of the light green gem dragon. He only had one and couldn't ride two dragons at the same time. Emily in front of him, loyalty was not a problem, and her talent was blessed by the smoke's power of fate. Perhaps she could be of great use. If the kingdom could come up with a Dragon Knight backup plan, he suddenly wanted to come up with such a plan. Of course, Emily was a woman. This world had never heard of a female Dragon Knight being born. Whether she was worth cultivating or not, he had to consider the risks involved. And women had to marry sooner or later. Liszt quickly suppressed his random thoughts. He thought for a moment and took out a purple crystal tortoiseshell the size of a palm from his space ring. "Take this tortoiseshell. I took it from the Dragon Knight Carl Low Violet. Wearing it will help your thunder attribute Do Chi grow." She took the tortoiseshell. Even though she had been pretending to be cold and mature, feeling the surging thunder attribute magic, Emily was still trembling with excitement. "Your Highness, Emily." She suddenly felt hot tears welling up in her eyes. She choked with sobs and couldn't speak. This was the Dragon Knight's personal item. Liszt said calmly, "If you think it's valuable, make good use of it. Grow quickly and drive me into battle." "Yes, your Highness, Emily belongs to your Highness. I swear my life to your Highness and am ready to fight for your Highness at any time." Emily could only repeat the declaration to express her gratitude. "With the tortoiseshell and a sufficient supply of potions, your Do Chi will not stagnate, so you don't have to practice hard every day. I will give you a new task. Take 2 hours a day to help me train the Blizzard Beast Squad. In the future, when we charge on the battlefield, they will be under your command." Emily solemnly said, "As you wish, your Highness." "Then from tomorrow onwards, arrive at Thorn Castle on time at 9 o'clock in the morning. I will personally teach you how to train the Blizzard Beast." "Yes. You may leave." Emily bowed respectfully and left Bramble Castle. Liszt breathed a sigh of relief. Dosun was an important helper in his rise. Without Dosun's siege, there would be no rapid development. But now that the Blizzard Beasts could not keep up, it would be a waste of their skills to keep them as pets. They were World of Warcraft, not native dogs. Leaving them to Emily to train may be the best choice. There was another thing that happened in the afternoon. Garcia and Fox, 2 Sky Knights who had been captured, asked to see Liszt. "What can I do for you two?" Liszt was quite helpless towards these 2 men. Alonso was confident that he could sweep Sapphire, so there was no need to talk about ransom at all. As a result, they were routed and fled without a trace. The issue of ransom for the 2 men was naturally far away. "Your Highness, His Highness Alonso has not paid ransom for us for a long time. This time, the Battle of the Dragon Slayer was won by His Highness. I am afraid it will be difficult for our ransom to be realized. We can't wait any longer. If we don't get the supply of potions, our chi cultivation will completely degenerate," Garcia said with a bitter face. Fox continued, "So after careful consideration, we hope to follow His Highness and fight for His Highness from now on." Both of them were orphans. Because they had not made too many contributions, they were not titled and did not get married. They had always been looking forward to making contributions for Alonso. However, they became captives in the Battle of Trap Dragon Mountain. Not only did they not make any contributions, but they also lost their training materials. The more advanced a knight was, the more they needed potions. Now that they had been imprisoned on Black Horse Island for more than 2 months, List naturally would not give them the potions. If this continues, their chi will degenerate, and they may even fall to the level of an Earth Knight. At that time, it would be difficult to attack the level of a Sky Knight. It was tantamount to a ruined future. In the face of the collapse of their cultivation, the end of their future, and the delay of the Lord to pay the ransom, the two were unable to maintain their loyalty to Alonso, even if they guessed that Alonso might be preparing to rescue them after the Battle of the Dragon Slayer and avoid paying the ransom. However, it was still not good. At least Alonso should have written a letter to take care of them, instead of ignoring them. Now that Alonso had failed in the Battle of the Dragon Slayer and List had risen strongly, the two naturally changed their mentality and surrendered to List. Chapter 745. This chapter is The Little Whale Who Loves Chocolate, Wanzhong Chang. The country needed a lot of manpower, and List, who planned to rob talents, naturally would not refuse 2 Sky Knight captives who were already familiar with him. In fact, during this period of time, the two of them had been doing a good job at the Knight Academy. Their characters were also passable. One could not expect a knight to swear to die and not surrender. A knight's war was a game for the nobles. If they were captured, they would either have to pay a ransom or surrender. He planned to separate the two. Garcia was arranged to go to the Iron Hoof City and be in charge of 1 Orders of Chivalry. Fox stayed on Black Horse Island and was also in charge of 1 Orders of Chivalry. Just like Garcia and Fox, after learning that Ichi was a magic shooter, the 3 archmages Lars, Cyril, and Delaka, who were captured from the Eagle Kingdom, cried out that they wanted to follow Ichi and listen to the teachings of the truth. In the understanding of mages, magic shooters were the embodiment of the truth in the secular world. So with Ichi's halo, Chris quickly established the Flame Territory Guild of Magic in the Mage Tower. With Ichi as the president, Chris as the vice president, and the 3 great magicians and Mary Dawn as the executive committee, the guild quickly set up a framework. All magicians who joined the guild were required to accept the guild's mandatory management, and all research projects had to be reviewed by the guild. Of course, List also referred to some of his own ideas and proposed a lot of constructive management plans for the Guild of Magic. For example, providing laboratories for the great magicians, funding projects, arranging magician assistants, magic apprentices, etc., but the great magicians had to turn in their research papers and research results. In fact, it was similar to the laboratory system on Earth, where the great magicians were the professors who did the research. The state funded the research, the professors enjoyed the honor, and the final results were turned in. At the same time, in addition to the magician's own cultivation level, there would also be a set of arcanist levels evaluated according to scientific research results. They were roughly divided into arcanist, great arcanist, chief arcanist, arcanist tutor, and so on. There was no such term as arcanist in this world, so List used it instead of the term professor. He always felt that arcanist was a little higher than professor. Under the framework of the Guild of Magic, the Arcanist Assessment Committee was quickly established. Ichi was appointed as the chairman of the committee with the right of veto and the right to forcibly promote. List, on the other hand, appointed himself as the observer of the committee, with the right of veto, direct promotion, and the right to dissolve the committee at any time. Basically, he had the final say in the Guild of Magic and the Arcanist Assessment. If he didn't say anything, then everything would be left to Ichi. If Ichi didn't say anything, she would follow the rules of the Guild of Magic and the Arcanist Assessment Board. The establishment of the Guild of Magic and the Arcanist Assessment Board was not a joke. As more and more mages in the territory participated in the construction of the territory, an effective system for managing mages had to be established to provide services to List at all times. For example, the cultivation of the crystal cyathea became the first topic of research after the establishment of the Guild of Magic. Magicians could choose to accept or reject the research. Once they accepted the research, they had to produce results within a specified time. He had successfully cultivated a new crystal cyathea and submitted the cultivation plan to the Guild of Magic for the large-scale cultivation of crystal cyathea in his territory. If you want to be taught by a magic shooter, you have to join the Guild of Magic and provide research results. Otherwise, get lost. List was very direct. Chris, you will strictly manage the Guild of Magic according to the requirements I set. Anyone who dares to violate the rules of the guild or is unwilling to join the guild will be expelled. Yes, Your Highness. In addition, mages are not allowed to conduct forbidden magic experiments in private. Once discovered, they will be expelled. If the circumstances are serious, they will be obliterated. He always had his guard up against mages. After setting the high standards, List finally had the time to inquire about the progress of some magic experiments. It's going to snow soon. How's the cultivation of the snow flame mushroom? Does it conflict with the flame mushroom in the weave? Judging from the current cultivation signs, although both are fire elemental cordyceps, they do not conflict with each other. Give me the detailed data as soon as possible. I'm ready to trade the cordyceps again. The cordyceps was a plan that List had made a long time ago. He wanted anything that could increase his potions. The Guild of Magic can release more research on the cordyceps. His Excellency Achilles told me the same thing. He believes that the relationship between the cordyceps and the weave is the most direct way for ordinary mages to study the weave. Yes. With a cheese arrangement, List could be at ease. He left the Mage Tower. He continued to deal with official business. Coral Island and Black Horse Island were mobilizing serfs to find new varieties of thorns, but the results were not good. There were no new varieties. Oxtail Territory and Ironhoof City also arranged for night to search. Lee William also wrote letters to many noble lords who were in contact with them, asking them to search for thorns. Even the Sapphire Grand Duke, List wrote a letter asking the Sapphire family to help find it. If Ella wanted to evolve, perhaps any new variety of thorns could trigger the evolution conditions, but in order to increase the probability of its evolution success, the more new varieties of thorns, the better. Even if the increase of pheromones did not increase the probability of success, at least it could give psychological comfort. On the path of evolution, List had no idea how to help Ella. Comfort, encouragement, watering, fertilizing, increasing pheromones, that was all he could do. The palace speedboats allocated by the Sapphire family were soon delivered to Black Horse Island. There were a total of 6 new ships. Originally, it was intended to supplement the palace fleet, but List wanted to find an archipelago as soon as possible to establish a country as soon as possible. The Grand Duke also wanted List to leave quickly. 6 speedboats, 3 for the territory to supplement trade, and 3 for Yevich and Kosto to train. As soon as the New Year's Day was over, they would set off for exploration. Not only was the Grand Duke anxious, but List also wanted to find a place to establish a country as soon as possible. The earlier they found it, the earlier they could develop it. Before the territory industry was fully spread out, they could directly complete the industry transfer to avoid too many losses during the transfer of the territory. Time flew by and half a month had passed. News about the Eagle Kingdom finally reached List's hands. There was information provided by the Sapphire Grand Duke and the Blood Servant. The Dragon Knight Karl Law is dead, and the Eagle Kingdom is furious. It is rumored that the king said on the spot that he would launch a second dragon-slaying war. The news of the failure of the dragon-slaying war spread, and the situation on the borders of the 3 countries was turbulent. Alonso had to rush to the front line immediately to take charge of the border. The Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom sent an emissary group on the way to Sapphire, ready to visit me? The Eagle Kingdom does not seem to give up, sending a large number of ships to harass the Sapphire Fleet trade route, and there are disputes at sea. Chapter 746. The light green gemstone dragon was still sleeping on the Dodo Island. The Eagle Kingdom's Dragon Knight candidate was not riding a dragon. I'm afraid that the loss of the dragon would cause turmoil in the kingdom, so they deliberately released false news. The Eagle Kingdom knew that they were no match for Sapphire's fleet, but they still sent a large number of ships out to sea. It seems that they were not harassing the trade route, but secretly looking for the light green gemstone dragon? List quickly understood. Because the Eagle Kingdom released false news in time, the situation did not collapse. After all, the Dragon Knight was dead, but the dragon was still there, which meant that the loss of combat power was not too much. Although the Dragon Knight was far stronger than a dragon, it was not to the extent of crushing it. Otherwise, the Dragon Knight would have killed dragons everywhere, and the evil dragon would not have survived. Strictly speaking, the Dragon Knight of the Night relied more on the strength of the dragon to practice. In the Dragon Knight system, the knight was the leader, but the dragon was the embodiment of combat power. Even the dragon fighting technique relied on the release of the dragon. Without the assistance of the knight, the dragon could only exert about 70% of its strength, but with the assistance of the knight, it could exert 110% of its strength. Carlotta was originally guarding the border with the Blast Furnace Kingdom. Now that the Kingdom of Eagle has claimed that the light green gemstone dragon is still there, and the royal families of the 2 kingdoms are connected by marriage, the Blast Furnace Kingdom has been stabilized. The Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom probably has no chance to join forces with the Blast Furnace Kingdom to attack. Should I leak the news of the light green gemstone dragon? List secretly wondered if he should make a big move. The benefits of making a big move were obvious. It would disrupt the stability of the Eagle Kingdom, make it difficult for them to take care of themselves, and naturally could not be distracted by the sea. But he certainly could not say that the light green gemstone dragon was obtained by him. If so, the three kingdoms might join forces to launch a dragon-slaying war to prevent him from making a big move. He also could not say that the light green gemstone dragon fell into the sea and died. In that case, all countries would come to the sea to salvage the dragon corpse. After all, the value of a dragon corpse was too great. Forget it. If I continue to anger or disturb the Eagle Kingdom, it is likely that I will bring disaster to the fish in the moat. I'm still too weak now. Steadily develop, wait for the light green gemstone dragon to recover, then gather the power of 2 dragons and the magic shooter, and then announce to dominate the sea. A dragon knight and a high mage, this kind of power would certainly threaten the continent's kingdoms, but it wouldn't be too great of a threat. It just so happened to be at a level where the kingdoms on the continent were extremely fearful of it, but it was not worth it to launch another dragon-slaying war. Another dragon would break the balance, and the mainland kingdom would not want to see another dragon-slaying war. The kingdom's rise was bound to annex Sapphire. At that time, with the combined power of 3 dragons and a high mage, the coastal kingdom would definitely be restless and would launch an even bigger dragon-slaying war. Kingdom's kingdom, kingdom and green and dragon-slaying king. King kingdom, was the kingdom, green Gemini balance is more beneficial. To maintain the balance. List was a bit proud. Who would have thought that the countryside baron would become such a sensational figure? Steel and Iron Ridge Kingdom sent an emissary group to visit me. What's their purpose? The Grand Duchy of Sapphire was a vassal state of the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom. Perhaps this time the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom had the same idea, wanting List to become a vassal state of the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom. If that's the case, should I agree? Vassal states had to pay tribute to the suzerain in order to receive protection from the suzerain. Sapphire was able to dominate the seas because Steel and Iron Ridge kept the Eagle Kingdom in check, preventing the Eagle Kingdom from launching a counterattack against Sapphire. Otherwise, the Eagle Kingdom would have made a move against Sapphire long ago. Even so, Sapphire was almost destroyed, which showed the disadvantage of a duchy against a kingdom. Logically speaking, as long as the conditions are good, becoming a vassal state isn't a bad thing. However, the specifics still have to depend on where my country is located. If it's too far from the Iron and Steel Ridge, there's no point in becoming a vassal state. Let's talk about it when the emissary group arrives. At that time, I'll discuss it with Marquis Oxtail. There was only half a month left before the New Year's Day. Good news came one after another. The Thorns worm was successfully bred, and List was successfully contracted. More than 100 knights had come to seek refuge, but they were all ordinary Earth Knight. Pilgrimage mages also came one after another, signing up to join the Guild of Magic, ready to exchange their research results for the opportunity to be mentored by archmages. At the same time, a new variety of thorns from the outer island was quickly transported back to Black Horse Island. List asked Ella to collect the thorns pheromone on the spot. But as expected, the smoke mission was still not completed after the collection. Obviously, a new variety of thorns was not enough and more was needed. The trade plan for discarded cordyceps was also carried out quickly. The 3 selected nobles had sent people to Black Horse Island with discarded cordyceps fungus and serfs to trade. The 3 new types of abandoned cordyceps were the earth attribute big fur, the water attribute white ghost pen, and the wind attribute greenwood ear. The trade went very smoothly, and none of the 3 families wanted to miss the new cordyceps. However, the snow flame mushroom could only be planted in winter. Even if the quality was better than ordinary flame mushroom, its value was still much lower. This trip, not only did List not earn gold coins from the trade, but he also lost 500 gold coins. At this point, the territory has 10 kinds of abandoned cordyceps. The water-type blue pine mushroom and white ghost brush, the earth-type golden thread fungus and big fur chicken, the wind-type greenwood ear fungus, the thunder-type flattery fungus, the ice-type monkey head mushroom, the dark-type black truffle, and the fire-type flame mushroom and snow flame mushroom. 8 magic attributes, only 1 light attribute cordyceps was missing. When the scale of all abandoned cordyceps reaches a critical point, the output of magic potions will never be much lower than the output of a big elf. However, abandoned cordyceps require far more manpower than ordinary plants. Even though the number of serfs in the territory has exceeded 100,000, there is still a gradual shortage of labor. White paper workshops and glass workshops are expanding, and seawater drying salt is also being promoted. In the era of industrialization, these industries all require a lot of manpower. 100,000 people is simply a drop in the bucket. There are still 100,000 serfs in Iron Heel City. There are no elves farming there. Maybe I should send them all to Black Horse Island and fully develop Black Horse Island. List looked at the increasing demand for serfs reported by the territorial officials and finally made a decision. Xavier, inform Isaiah to make arrangements for the new serfs. Isaiah has been transferred to the Port Town Administrative Officer, taking over Blair's vacancy. On the other hand, Gort and the former Administrative Officer Blair went to Iron Shoe City to take up their new post. List was going to write to Gort and ask him to make arrangements for the transfer of 50,000 serfs from Iron Shoe City. Iron Heel City can develop its trade with peace of mind. He intends to lease the land to the Tulip family for farming. While the Flame territory was busy, a group of knights under the banner of the Uwashi family followed the fleet of the Tulip family to Black Horse Port. The leader was Dean Uwashi, the eldest son of the Marquis of Wildwave. List received Dean in the Thorn Fort, accompanied by Marquis D. Maria Rainflower Stone and a great elf who was sleeping soundly in a jade box. It was fat, turquoise, and had a small bean sprout with a green bean pod on its head. Chapter 747. As a domain knight and an old Marquis, Marquis Wildwave had a total of 4 great sprites. They were the Barley Great Sprite, the Pea Great Sprite, the 5-Leaf Brocade Great Sprite, and the Eucalyptus Great Sprite. Among them, the most valuable was undoubtedly the 5-Leaf Brocade Great Sprite because it could grow potions. The second was the Barley Great Sprite, which could produce the staple barley. But after some consideration, List chose the youngest Pea Great Sprite, which was only 75 years old. Peas were the most common food for commoners. Nobles usually did not eat beans and only used them as fodder for their horses. But List was different. The beans in his territory were very valuable and could be used in all kinds of bean products. And most importantly, his territory had a special product: mushroom peas. Mushroom peas could grow large amounts of rhizobia, helping the land to fix nitrogen and increasing crop production. All the wasteland would quickly become fertile after 2 crops of peas. During the farm rotation, List mainly let the territory plant mushroom peas and harvest rhizobia. He then used rhizobia on other leguminous plants to increase the yield of leguminous plants. Soybeans, peas, cowpeas, mung beans as well as Gladitsia sinensis and peanuts could all obtain rich rhizobia nitrogen fixation. But the mushroom peas' rhizobia was most effective on peas and broad beans. So List had been secretly thinking about how he could mutate soybeans and peanuts to produce rhizobia. In short, the 5-Leaf Brocade Great Sprite couldn't even kill Marquis Wildwave. The Barley Great Sprite was too old, so List chose the Pea Great Sprite after some consideration. Relying on the mutated mushroom peas and the continuous promotion of beans, the Pea Great Sprite was very useful. Under List's gaze, Dean reluctantly activated his chi and removed the contract with the Pea Great Sprite. The Pea Great Sprite had just woken up, and before it could react, List roughly stuck his finger into its mouth and pinched it. Its teeth unconsciously closed. In the blink of an eye, a clear telepathic link was formed between him and the Pea Great Sprite. Licking the blood that was still on the tip of its tongue, the Great Pea Sprite was a little confused. It looked at Dean and felt that he was an acquaintance, but there was no sense of closeness like in the past. On the contrary, the good-looking stranger in front of it gave it a very warm feeling. It was just a nap and suddenly everything was different. Your Highness List, I've handed Dinho over to you. Can my father regain his freedom? Dean asked, enduring the discomfort. Why don't you stay for lunch? How could Dean be in the mood? He just wanted to leave right now and go far away. He no longer had to feel the pain of having to part with the great elf. However, Marquis Wildwave said, Thank you for your hospitality, Your Highness. Then we, father and son, will not disturb Your Highness. The food of Thorn Castle is truly unforgettable. As a domain knight, his captive life on Black Horse Island was very comfortable, with good food and drink. Thus, they quickly fell in love with the rich food and clean environment here. If it wasn't for the fact that they were enemies, this place could have been a vacation spot. List smiled slightly. It doesn't matter. It's just lunch. It won't take up much time. He had a good impression of Marquis Wildwave. During this time, he had a lot of discussions about the practice of the battle energy field. Although List did not intend to study the battle energy field, he still had to try the necessary practice, lest he had the secret book but did not know how to practice systematically. Sir Dean, when you set off from the Eagle Kingdom, Did you learn about the kingdom's reaction to the Battle of the Dragon Slayer? List suddenly asked. Dean glanced at his father. Marquis Wildwave was holding a teacup and tasting the fine green tea. When he heard this, he could not help but scold. What do you need to hide in front of your highness? Dean replied with embarrassment. Your highness, List, I don't know enough. After receiving your letter, the family hurriedly prepared the ransom and went to Sapphire. I only heard some news along the way. The coastal areas were talking about the Battle of the Dragon Slayer and were shocked by the death of His Highness Carl, but the reaction of the kingdom's top officials is still unclear. List could not deny it. In a world without the internet, it would be impossible for the results of the Battle of the Dragon Slayer to spread in a few months. Except for some of the top nobles, the small nobles and civilians in the vast area did not know about the Battle of the Dragon Slayer and rarely cared about things outside their territory. Most of the civilians had never left the town or village where they lived in their entire lives. Even those small nobles rarely went out if it was not because of the war. The cost of going out was very considerable and they might as well stay in their territory. In short, if List wanted to know more about the Battle of the Dragon Slayer, he could only wait for Mary and other blood servants to continue to send back news from the Eagle Kingdom. The lunch was grand mainly because of the variety of dishes. Marquis Wildwave ate happily, but his son Dean was a little nervous. He had just tried many of the new dishes and was still not used to it. After the lunch, Marquis Wildwave suddenly proposed, Your Highness, your territory has many novel specialties. If possible, I hope to open a trade with your territory. At this time, you don't mind the attitude of the Eagle Kingdom's royal family? The Dragon Knight will naturally worry about the royal family's affairs. I followed His Highness Alonso to war, lost troops and was even captured. The royal family can't compensate me. I can only find ways to reduce the losses myself. Di Maria did not care much about the royal family's attitude. The feudal lords enjoyed great autonomy, and the royal family did not interfere too much. What materials do you want to trade? Green tea, glass, white paper and porcelain. These were all products that Di Maria had enjoyed during this time and felt that they had great prospects. Glass, white paper and porcelain can be traded, but green tea production is insufficient. At most, it can supply your castle. However, there is a product that I don't know if you have any ideas about. Your Highness, please speak clearly. Salt, better sea salt than well salt and pond salt. Salt? Di Maria raised his eyebrows and seemed to be thinking. After a moment he made a decision. I am very interested, but I don't know how much sea salt is produced. Leave this to the servants. Have some tea. After reaching a verbal agreement on trade cooperation, Marquis Wildwave and his party set off to leave Black Horse Island. Only then did List have time to communicate carefully with the Great Pea Sprite. The Great Sprite had a strong independent mind, so even though it had established a contract with List, it was still unhappy and unwilling to face List after learning of its situation. Dinho, you will live here from now on. List walked into the worm room and saw Dinho, the Great Pea Sprite, hiding in the worm room. Dinho was the name given to it by the Wuxia family. Chapter 748. This chapter is The Chariot Past. Ahem. List coughed dryly. Dinho was talking about Ella. After Ella saw the pea elf move into the bug room, she began to declare her sovereignty. In Thorn Castle, Ella thought that she was the boss and sooner or later she would be subdued. She didn't expect a big elf to appear halfway, which made her nervous. What's more, there was a big elf with sharp teeth living outside the castle. These elves were constantly provoking her position, which was not a good sign. Thorn Castle would not allow such a powerful elf to exist. Ella is just a little grumpy. You can just ignore it. Anyway, since you're here, you have to integrate into my family. List shook hands with the pea elf. How about we start by changing our names and slowly get used to the new life? Change my name? Well, Dinho is a thing of the past. You should have a new name. No matter how smart the pea elf was, it was only a big elf. Soon, List guided it out of its disappointment. What name should I change? You are a pea elf. I think the name Ike is more suitable for you. There was once a very powerful knight named Ice Archer Ike. She had a pea elf who evolved into a dragon elf. Others gave her a nickname, Pea Archer. List casually made up a story. After a few books, his ability to tell stories was already very good. I hope you can evolve into a dragon elf one day, so Ike will be a good wish. The pea elf tilted its head and thought for a moment, then readily agreed. Well, then I will be called Ike. That was it. List's second elf was officially named Ike. Although it was a second-hand elf, it still made him excited for a long time. It had to be said that compared to Parker, a big elf who could ruin the scenery with his mouth, the P-elf was really beautiful and deserved the beautiful title of elf. Her personality was also very normal. She might be a little cold, but most elves were relatively cold. After asking about Ike's favorite flavor of corn powder, List immediately asked someone to bring a lot for her as a snack. He then closed the door and left the room. Just in time to hear Ella at the window of the worm room, making a wow sound. List looked up at the chandelier on the walkway and felt a little emotional. Why do the elves I get have such personalities, while the elves others get are so peaceful? Is it because I respect the development of the elves' personality? In his opinion, it was very likely that this was the case. The great nobles of this world treated elves as farming tools. He was the only one who saw the elves as independent individuals and did not restrict the development of the elves' individual will. Parker's venomous tongue and narcissism, Ella's domineering and violent temper, Nami's socialization and diligence, Mickey's addiction to counting corn and Fitz, Tam and Eddie's frequent civil war. He did not impose any restrictions. He only set a bottom line: they were not allowed to hurt the elves, and they were not allowed to hurt each other. Judging from the fact that Ella has triggered the evolution of the great elves, my reasonable connivance may be more helpful to the evolution of the elves? List was vaguely proud of himself. Perhaps, as he had guessed, personality could play a role in promoting the evolution of elves. In the beginning, Ella broke the shackles of fate and evolved into a little elf because of the thorns worm's unwillingness. And Ella, whose status was threatened, began to trigger the evolution of a great elf because of her desire to be strong. Maybe I can start from the personality aspect and cultivate the potential of the elves to evolve. Forget it, it always feels like a kind of destruction to interfere with the personality of the elves. Now that I am a dragon knight, there is no need to torture the elves. I will provide convenience for them, and the rest is to let them live a stable life. List had never been able to treat the elves as a tool. Wow. His thoughts were interrupted by Ella's cry. He no longer thought about these things. Everything was fine. The top priority was to complete the evolution of Ella and welcome his third great elf. I hope this snow does not affect too much area, otherwise the thorns will not be easy to find. Thorns were evergreen plants, often mixed in bushes. It was easy to find the traces of thorns in winter, provided that it did not snow. If the snow was buried, nothing could be found. In the evening, the Iron Knight Alvin Eaglesword came to Thorn Castle and sent the improved Roar of Thunder Knight suit. Your Royal Highness, according to your request and with the assistance of the Guild of Magic, I have successfully engraved the flame pattern on the Roar of Thunder and added some fire attribute materials, which can effectively increase the fire attribute of combat energy. This set of knight armor was originally worn by Carl Law. However, Carl Law was much shorter than List, so it had to be improved. The improved Fury of Thunder was no longer silver-white, but a silver-white background with fiery red lines outlined. From a distance, the red lines were distinct, and the color effect of the flame was very three-dimensional. Not bad, the improvement is very good. After changing to the Roar of Thunder, it felt very suitable. After sending Alvin away, he went straight to the locker room to look in the mirror. The mirror reflected a handsome and domineering knight. Putting on the helmet and looking left and right, List said again, "Bring me my tricolor cloak." Usually, these equipment were placed in the space ring, but occasionally they would be taken out for the servants to clean. Soon, the manservant Thomas handed over the cloak and helped List put it on his shoulders. At this moment, List was wearing the Roar of Thunder with the Ice Soul Dragon slaying sword at his waist, a red, black and gold-edged tricolor cloak on his back, and 3 space rings on his hands. Handsome, confident, and domineering. I always feel that the color of the sword doesn't match. The color of the armor and cloak are very compatible. The red cloak and the red armor lines complement each other, but the blue greatsword doesn't match. If I replace the Ice Soul Dragon slaying sword with the pure silver Fury of Thunder, the lack of red lines doesn't seem to match. Alvin is still too noob to engrave the flame pattern on the Fury of Thunder. The quality of the material of the Dragon Spear Fury of Thunder was far superior to the material of the armor Roar of Thunder. Alvin was just an ordinary Iron Knight and could not carry out a second forging. He changed out of the armor. Changing back to Frack Abier, List walked into the study and continued to ponder the Fire Dragon Knight Dragon Combat secret book. Recently he was entangled with mundane affairs. At present, this secret book still only had one move, dragon slaying. Countless inspirations collided and flashed in his mind, and he did not settle down to ponder. And he was destined to not ponder for long, and was entangled with trivial matters again. Achi returned from the sea. Like List, she had been arming her strength during this period, always thinking of creating powerful magic in line with her identity as a magic shooter. So now you've created magic that is stronger than advanced magic? List asked as he followed Achi out. The level of magic was officially registered by the Guild of Magic. It was classified into 3 categories: basic magic, prototype magic array, ordinary magic, static magic array, and advanced magic, dynamic magic array. Achi nodded and said, "Brother." Achi studied the Weave and Dragon Combat secret book, plus the knowledge that brother taught in the past, and finally found the clue of higher level magic. The first new magic that surpasses advanced magic is still in its embryonic form and not perfect. They came to the sea. While the sky was not completely dark, Achi began to release her new magic. She took a deep breath and brewed it for a full 10 seconds before suddenly raising her right hand. The next moment, the weave appeared and countless high-energy magic was extracted from the weave. On the calm sea, a huge water curtain slowly rose. The water curtain seemed to form the shape of a chainsaw, and the water at the edge of the saw moved at high speed, making a sound similar to a sonic boom. Go. Achi waved to the rocky beach on the shore. Chapter 749. It was very powerful. List felt that the power of Achi's magic was comparable to a charged attack when he was riding a dragon, but it was still a little short of the power of the Dragon Slash. If he were to use the Dragon Slash, I'm afraid that one move would not only cut the rocky beach in half, but the surrounding rocks would also be completely shattered. The move of the Dragon Warrior contained real explosive power. Can't it be cast instantaneously? List jumped to the rocky beach and carefully examined the rocks cut by the water chainsaw. The cut was not smooth, but the power of the attack was very condensed. In the vision of the magic eye, he could still see traces of magic. According to his experience, such power could already pose a great threat to the Dragon Knight, and it was indeed beyond the level of advanced magic. Achi shook her head and said, "Not yet. This kind of magic is very difficult to maintain. The rune calculations required are very complex, and the power will be doubled with the help of the sea. But if it is released on the ground, not only the release speed will be slowed down, but the power will also be weakened a lot." List subconsciously reached out and stroked Achi's blue hair. "Practice more. If you master this move, you'll definitely be on par with a full-fledged Dragon Knight in a head-on battle on the sea." When she was with List, Achi would take off her hood and reveal her flawless face. Unfortunately, since putting on clothes, she has never shown her natural figure in front of List. This often made List feel sorry. "By the way, do you have a name for this magic, and how do you judge the level?" "What do you think, brother?" "I don't know much about the magic principle of this move, so I can't judge it. You make your own decision. The cleverest housewife cannot cook without rice." List did not understand this magic at all, and he was a little tired thinking about it. Achi thought for a moment. "Then this magic will be called Chainsaw Super High Pressure Water Knife. Its principle is similar to Chainsaw and High Pressure Water Knife. As for the level, it will be classified as Super Magic. According to the principle of magic arrays, it should be a dynamic acceleration magic array, or a high-speed magic array." At this point, the classification of magic was completely clear. The magic cultivation system was also in sharp contrast with the knight cultivation system. Basic magic, prototype magic array, magic apprentice versus apprentice knight, elementary combat energy, basic combat energy moves. Normal magic, static magic array, magician versus earth knight, intermediate chi secret book. Advanced magic, dynamic magic array, archmagus versus sky knight, advanced warrior energy secret book. Super magic, high-speed magic array, magic shooter versus dragon knight, draconic energy secret manual. With such a comparison, List keenly discovered that regardless of whether it was the Dragon Knight or the Mage, the two different training systems had a similar hierarchy. It could be seen that in terms of the use of magic, regardless of whether it was a knight who focused on refining his own combat aura or a sorcerer who absorbed free magic, they both achieved the same result through different means. No wonder the world was once ruled by mages and now the world is ruled by knight. These two cultivation systems are probably highly efficient at using mana. Survival of the fittest. That was probably the reason. On the way back, List raised another question. Achi, the mage and the knight's training methods are similar, and the magic shooter uses the magic net, while the dragon knight uses the magic net. Do you think there will be a higher level of mage and knight if we continue to train? I don't know, brother. Achi hasn't even studied the magic shooter thoroughly yet. All right. List himself had not studied the Dragon Knight thoroughly, so he no longer worried about the future and asked, "You have been preparing to switch elemental forms, have you found any clues to switch?" Achi was a water mage and could not release the other 7 types of magic, which made her feel that her strength was greatly limited. In view of the fact that she could use magic traction to release natural magic that belonged to chaos magic, and that she had recently developed a magic armament that could store clothes. In theory, the magic shooter could use the magic net to forcibly switch their own elemental bodies to complete the release of various types of magic. However, she shook her head. "I feel that there are a lot of clues, but after careful study, I found too many problems and restrictions, so Achi is still distressed." "All right, take your time to study, no hurry." There was indeed no need to worry about the current situation. The news that the Eagle Kingdom was holding on to the light green gem dragon showed that the kingdom was empty and simply unable to launch another dragon-slaying war. The Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom sent an emissary mission, indicating that they had the intention of befriending and not resorting to war. The 2 kingdoms that could influence the sea were stable, so naturally List was more stable. He was waiting for the arrival of the emissary mission. However, before the emissary mission arrived, Marquis Merlin arrived at Black Horse Island with Meopel and his wife. At the request of Marquis Merlin, the fleet went straight to Black Horse Port without passing through Tulip Castle. List personally welcomed them to the port. The palace speedboat docked, and Meopel and Angela supported a white-haired old man as they slowly disembarked from the ship. It was the grandfather that List felt closest to, Merlin Longtaro. "Grandfather." "Good." Marquis Merlin gripped List's hand tightly, but his body had completely collapsed. No matter how tightly he gripped, it would be too weak. His complexion was also extremely gloomy, making people wonder if he could survive this winter. However, the old man was in a good mood. When the news that List had become a Dragon Knight reached his ears, he understood that the Taro family had an unshakable backer. The family might not dare to say that it would flourish forever, but at least during the years when List was alive, it was absolutely safe and sound and no one dared to touch it. Because Marquis Merlin's health was too poor, he did not stay at the port. He directly boarded a carriage and headed for Thorn Castle. List rode the Chocobo Loki. Under normal circumstances he did not ride Leo as it was inconvenient to go back and forth, so he rode Loki to hurry along. Meopel rode a steed and walked side by side with List. "List, you're really something." His expression was excited as he exclaimed in admiration, "Dragon Knight, you are actually my cousin. I haven't been able to sleep well for several days, it feels incredible." "Just so. You know, as soon as I say that I am the cousin of the Dragon Knight, many aristocratic ladies would crazily throw themselves at my bed, just to get an excuse that is almost impossible to get close to you." List paid attention to the main point. "Are you still messing around outside?" No, I am very decent." "Oh, by the way, I have good news I can't help but tell you." Meopel had a happy expression on his face. "After taking the life vitality potion you sent, I finally succeeded. Angela is pregnant." "Ah. Oh, congratulations." List was really happy for his cousin. Meopel grinned, Thank you. After returning to Thorn Castle, List settled Marquis Merlin down, sent a knight to Tulip Castle to send a message and prepared for a luncheon. Marquis Merlin came to Black Horse Island for the new year. Now that Thorn Castle was completely built, there were too many houses to live in, and it was not a problem to receive all the members of the Taro family. However, Mesiro and his wife had to wait until the day before the new year. After all, they still had to preside over the affairs of Red Crab Island. After a while, heavy snow was still falling. Marquis Merlin stood on the balcony of Thorn Castle and watched as List called out the little fire dragon Leo. Chapter 750. If one was not from this world, it would be difficult to understand the knight's attitude towards dragons. It was an emotion that had been brainwashed from childhood to adulthood. Even if List himself was obsessed with dragons and liked the beauty of power, it still could not compare to the reverence the indigenous people had for dragons. It was a mixture of many emotions, reaching a distorted and morbid degree. There was reverence like worshipping a god, but there was also a possessiveness like wanting to destroy it if it could not be obtained. A few decades ago, Marquis Merlin communicated with the Sapphire Dragon and expressed that if it was not contracted, the Dragon Lord would kill it. That might have been a joke, or he only dared to say it while the Sapphire Dragon was asleep. But now, the aged Marquis Merlin could no longer say those frivolous words of his youth. He just looked at the little fire dragon Leo and constantly praised him. So beautiful. Leo had always despised humans, so he was very dissatisfied that he was repeatedly called out by List like a monkey being looked at as if he was a rare monkey. He turned his head and coldly glanced at Thorn Castle before flapping his wings and flying into the sky, quickly disappearing without a trace in the heavy snow. "Ah, the fire dragon flew away," Meopel exclaimed from the side. List explained, "Leo is just flying around in the sky, it will come back soon." He and Leo could communicate with each other through the Dragon Heart Code, which was an ultra-long-distance communication technology. Little Princess Angela supported Marquis Merlin. She had seen the sapphire dragon since childhood and grew up with dragons, so she was no stranger to dragons. She had the most complicated feelings towards List's fire dragon. The fire dragon had saved Sapphire, but because of the fire dragon, Sapphire was about to lose its hegemony. Moreover, she looked up and thought of the petite maid she had seen in the living room. She suddenly felt a mountain of pressure. In this strange-looking castle without battlements or arrow towers, which seriously lacked a sense of security, lived a dragon knight and an arch-wizard. It was really hard to imagine. The Taro family, which she had once looked down upon, had become a great aristocrat that could not be ignored because of the relationship between the dragon knight and the arch-wizard. She had to restrain her thoughts and earnestly play the role of the future mistress of the Taro family. Now that she was pregnant, she was completely related to the Taro family. Angela sighed in her heart. Women couldn't escape the shackles of their families after all. Their unrestrained and wanton lives had come to an end. "Grandpa, the temperature on the balcony is low. Let's go back to the room," List said. Some of the rooms in the Thorn Fort had already been installed with calming divine beads, making them warm in winter and cool in summer. Marquis Merlin refused. "When the fire dragon comes back, I'll take another look." Seeing this, List immediately used the Dragon Heart Code to call Leo, telling him to come back quickly and not to wander around in the snow. After a while, Leo landed on an open space near the castle. The open space had been tamped down, and a 100-meter-high stone platform would be built here next spring. The rocks produced by the blizzard beast are piled up nearby, ready for construction at any time. After Marquis Merlin carefully admired it for a moment, List waved his hand, and Leo flew into the sky in an instant, turning into a ball of flames and rushing into his body. "An elemental dragon is truly amazing," Marquis Merlin exclaimed. In the afternoon of the next day, the family from Tulip Castle arrived at Thorn Fort. Lady Penelope, Lee William, Lady Marie, Levis, Rolia, Olvera, Lytton, and little Richard all followed the team. After some pleasantries, they settled down at Thorn Fort. Lady Penelope and Olvera planned to stay at Thorn Fort until the end of the new year, and List naturally would not refuse. Thorn Fort was big enough. It was just that there was a shortage of servants in the castle. The dozens of child servants that had been trained were obviously not competent for their own work. They could only select serfs who had been servants in the Eagle Kingdom from the new serfs in the territory and continue to serve Thorn Fort. The serpentines of these servants were very poor, so they did some manual work. The former servants of the castle, such as Thomas, Little Lily, and the others, began to do the work of receiving guests. Perhaps their background and self-restraint were still lacking compared to the servants of great nobles, but this was only the beginning. With the rise of List, their background could naturally be slowly accumulated. After the banquet, the female guests gathered together and gossiped. The men went to List's study, which could be called a library. Rows of bookshelves were filled with all kinds of books. Of course, most of the books List had not even read. He only used them to decorate his appearance and let people know that he was a well-read and cultured person. The servants served tea. The topic mainly revolved around how List would establish a kingdom in the future. Whether it was the Tulip family or the Taro family, they were not old nobles. They had not experienced the founding of the Grand Duchy of Sapphire, so they had no idea how to establish a kingdom. But even if they had not eaten pork, they had seen pigs run. The Sapphire family's operation method was the best reference. "Has the family thought of a new surname?" Lee William asked. Splitting the family was inevitable. After all, List was only the second son of the Tulip family. He did not legally have the right to inherit the family. The greater his achievements, the more inevitable the result of splitting the family would be. "Tentatively it will be Flame," List replied. He had more than one dragon, but the family name could only be named after the exposed fire dragon. He really could not think of a better surname. Raging Flame was too vulgar, Burning Flame was too light, Burning Sky was too Chinibu, Fury Flame was too extreme, and Dragon Flame was too common. No matter which one he chose, he would regret it. After thinking about it, he simply used the straightforward Flame as the new surname, just like the Sapphire family used Sapphire as their surname. Sometimes straightforwardness was the foundation. The royal family of the Eagle Kingdom had the surname White Iron and the surname Moonlight Silver. They were equally straightforward, using the name of the dragon as their surname. Leo was the fire dragon, and the fire dragon was the incarnation of the flame. Flame was the purest name. Perhaps it did not sound as pretentious as raging flame, burning sky, red lotus of fire, eternal flame, and prairie fire. But if one carefully tasted it, the flame had a kind of natural charm. In any case, the surnames of nobles were not fixed. When there were more dragon riders, at worst, they would just change it to some domineering surname like Lord of Dragons or Dragon Shepherd. Marquis Merlin chewed on the word flame and unconsciously nodded. List flame, I think it's not bad. It suits your temperament as a fire dragon knight. So, when are you going to separate? Levis followed up with a question. After the new year. List himself did not care. Regardless of whether he separated or not, there would not be too many changes. The Tulip family would also not become estranged because of the separation. For example, the Golden Wheat family that Luolia came from maintained a very close relationship with the Golden Wheat family. They did not have the idea that they would be strangers after the separation. When the Small Kerchief Island Lord was destroyed, the Big Kerchief Island Lord had worked hard for the Small Kerchief Island Lord. Separation meant the prosperity of the family. In the Blue Blood Alliance, there were many small families that had been separated from the Sapphire family, surrounding and protecting the Sapphire family. As such. Chapter 751. This chapter is Fairy and Dreamwalking. Grandfather, Father, how do you think we should deal with the coming Steel Ridge Kingdom emissary delegation? The topic in the study revolved around establishing a nation. List was looking forward to Marquis Merlin and Marquis Oxtail's political wisdom. It was true that he was the dragon knight who stood at the peak of power, but establishing a nation could not be stabilized by strength alone. He still needed to balance his own forces and external forces. In this regard, he obviously did not see it as clearly as the two veteran nobles. The most important thing was that he had only been rising for a short time and did not have a deep understanding of the world's knight system. In other words, he despised this backward system in his heart. He knew that the system must be in line with productivity, but he could not dispel his sense of superiority from the civilized world and change his contempt for the backward system. First of all, we need to analyze the purpose of the Steel Ridge Kingdom emissary delegation. Marquis Merlin set the tone. Judging from the current information, the emissary delegation must have come for the situation of List's nation. The Dragon Knight and the Magic Shooter working together will be unstoppable. The attitude of the Steel Ridge Kingdom should be obvious. Lee William nodded. The Steel Ridge Kingdom hopes to become their vassal state, expand their forces and treat the future flame like Sapphire. Maybe List, you will be named the Grand Duke of the Flame soon. So, Father, Grandfather, do you support my country becoming a vassal state of the Steel Ridge Kingdom? If we want to establish a nation in this sea, becoming a vassal state of the Steel Ridge Kingdom is the best choice. The Eagle Kingdom has mastered sailing technology and is in a competitive relationship with us. Moreover, the Eagle Kingdom is declining. If we unite with the Steel Ridge Kingdom, we may be able to share more benefits in the future. Lee William said. Marquis Merlin frowned. Uniting with the Steel Ridge Kingdom may not be a good thing. If the power of the continent is balanced, we can benefit from both sides. If the Steel Ridge Kingdom is strong, they may attack the sea. List's Dragon Knight and Achi's Magic Shooter will change the continent's view of the sea. But the Eagle Kingdom has already become enemies with us. I'm afraid there is no way to change sides. There are only interests in a country, no friends or enemies. But I'm still inclined to become a vassal state of the Iron and Steel Ridge. I want to join hands with Sapphire to dominate the sea and completely cut off the mainland kingdom's hand on the sea. Lee William, you're too superficial. Cough cough. Marquis Merlin coughed a few times. His body was getting weaker and weaker, but he was excited. The sea is no longer the exclusive domain of Sapphire. Ever since the Bull family rebelled and brought out sailing technology, the sea is about to usher in a new era. What era? William asked. In this era of strife, the Eagle Kingdom can see the threat of the sea, and the Iron and Steel Ridge can naturally see the convenience of the sea. The rise of the Dragon Knight and the Magic Shooters will accelerate the development of the sea. If this island can nurture a Dragon Knight, then it will no longer be a desolate land. But in the end, the sea is still lacking in resources. It can't accommodate too many forces. Even if they can't tolerate it, they still have to intervene. The mainland kingdom won't give the island countries the time and space to take off. Just wait and see, the future struggle on the sea will definitely not be as peaceful as the mainland. Marquis Merlin's eyes flickered with wisdom, as if he had already seen the magnificent Great Voyage era. The Taro family had always been known for their shrewdness. Back then, his father had gambled all the family's assets to fund the Grand Duke's development order, in exchange for the huge profits of Red Crab Island. He himself had been unhindered for decades, accumulated a lot of resources and improved the family's status. Unfortunately, he did not have many children. His son's talent was poor, and his grandson's talent was also average, which made him feel suffocated. However, in his grandson he saw the glory of the Taro family's bloodline. Liszt had inherited too many of his mother's good looks. Looking at this handsome and charming face, he could not help but think of his little daughter Melissa, who was like the apple of his eye. Liszt Flame, you have the ability to change the structure of the sea. In the future, the sea will inevitably set off huge waves because of you. Whether it is the Iron and Steel Ridge Eagle Bear or Sapphire, they will all lose to you in the end. Seize the opportunity, and the former Grand Duke's title, Master of the Sea, will belong to you. Of course, I understand this. Liszt calmly accepted his grandfather's praise. This was the future he had planned. I just think that even if a country is to be built, I'm afraid it will not be in this sea. The expedition fleet has not yet set off, but if they find a suitable archipelago to build a country, they should be far away from the Iron and Steel Ridge and even away from Eagle Bear. Oh, this is indeed possible. Lee William and Marquis Merlin nodded at the same time. If this is the case, it is better to deceive the emissary group first, wait for the location of the country to be found, and then discuss the next step. If we can't find a suitable location at sea, we can find out if it is possible to build a country within the sphere of influence of the Iron and Steel Ridge. It is not necessary to build a country in the Iron and Steel Ridge, but we must understand the attitude and sincerity of the Iron and Steel Ridge royal family. I see. Grandfather, father, when the emissary group arrives, you will communicate with the emissary group on my behalf. Yes. Marquis Merlin nodded directly. Lee William, as Liszt's father, naturally would not refuse. 3 days later, on December 24th, the emissary group of the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom, accompanied and escorted by the eldest prince, arrived at Black Horse Island. Liszt received the emissary group on the dock. The head of the emissary group spoke in a standard steel voice and bowed gracefully. Dear Royal Highness Liszt Tulip, Kent the Magic Elephant, the head of the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom's emissary group, on behalf of the only king of the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom, His Majesty Osborne Platinum, greets you and congratulates you on becoming a member of the Dragon Knight. At the same time, greetings to His Excellency Achilles Royd's Truth. The birth of the Archmage is a symbol of truth's reappearance in the secular world. Liszt bowed to accept the other party's greeting. Thank you for His Majesty Osborne's greetings. On behalf of me and His Excellency Achilles Royds, I also extend our sincere greetings to His Majesty Osborne. Your Highness Liszt, please allow me to present His Majesty's gift to you and His Excellency Achilles Royds. Kent waved his hand, and the members of the emissary group immediately came over with a large pile of gifts. With Liszt's retainer knight, one gift at a time was delivered. They were all very expensive gifts: gems, jade, magic metals, World of Warcraft materials, and some specialties. Every time a gift was traded, a member of the emissary group would shout out the name of the gift. These valuable gifts caused many knights to gasp and marvel at the value of the gifts. Liszt smiled and waited for the delivery of the gifts. This was the moment for the kingdom to declare its majesty and wealth, and he didn't mind the behavior of the emissary group. He just looked at the distinctive clothing style of the emissary group. With the Magic Elephant as his surname, Kent, the head of the emissary group, must have been born in a noble family that practiced both magic and qi, just like the Grand Duchy of Sapphire's Magic Goat family, which was destroyed 100 years ago. King Osborne probably heard that an Archmage was born and deliberately chose such a family. From this point it could be seen that King Osborne was still very sincere. As for King Osborne himself, Liszt didn't know much, but he had heard a little about him from the Sapphire Grand Duke, who said that he was a young, promising and talented monarch. But he was not yet a Dragon Knight. Chapter 752. This chapter is 100,000 Years of Salted Fish. The Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom was the strongest of the 3 kingdoms in the northeast corner of the legendary continent. According to the data provided by the Sapphire Grand Duke, there were 11 dragons, including 7 Dragon Knight. There were also 4 Dragon Knight in the 7 vassal kingdoms. The Grand Duchy of Sapphire's Dragon Knight, which was the Grand Duke himself, was included, but List and the little fire dragon Leo were not included. The Eagle Kingdom had 9 dragons, including 6 Dragon Knight. Now 1 dragon was lost and 1 Dragon Knight was dead. However, no one knew that the Eagle Kingdom had lost a dragon, and there were still 2 Dragon Knight in the 5 vassal kingdoms. Another kingdom, the Blast Furnace Kingdom, had 8 dragons including 5 Dragon Knight. The 4 vassal kingdoms only had 1 Dragon Knight. The Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom was the strongest, but it did not have the strength to crush the other 2 kingdoms. The 3 kingdoms often fought with each other for hundreds of years. The emissary group was warmly received. List himself put on airs and did not communicate much with Kent the Magic Elephant. He let Marquis Merlin and Lee William communicate on his behalf. He asked Prince Anthony, "Are you familiar with the Osborne Kingdom?" Anthony recalled, "When I was young I lived in the City of Steel for 3 years. I studied at the Royal Knight Academy and interacted with King Osborne, who was still a prince at the time. Osborne was very talented. He became a Sky Knight at the age of 17 and became a Sword Saint at the age of 19. He is now 30 years old. That is to say, he still lacks some qualifications to be a Dragon Knight candidate? For the Platinum royal family, there is no guarantee that there will be a Dragon Knight candidate in every generation. After all the Dragon Knight candidates are rare geniuses. It is very rare for a family to have a Dragon Knight candidate. It is impossible for every generation to have a Dragon Knight candidate." This was true. Riding a dragon would not make one's genes mutate and become a Superman. In the end, it only increased the energy level of the battle energy. However, the family had been nourished by magic potions for a long period of time. Coupled with marriage with an equally outstanding bloodline, the descendants would definitely be more talented than ordinary people. However, the Dragon Knight candidate was a mutated individual that couldn't be speculated with common sense. It is said that the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom has existed for more than 800 years. According to the surname of the royal family Platinum, doesn't that mean that the Platinum Dragon is about to fly back to the Dragon Valley? That's not it. Anthony explained, the White Golden Dragon is about 500 years old. The royal family changed their surname once after riding the White Golden Dragon. It's not clear why they changed their surname. The royal family basically never mentioned these things. The 500-year-old Platinum Dragon was 100 years older than the Light Emerald Dragon. Does Osborne have to target the Platinum Dragon? Aren't there 3 other dragons that we can ride? It's probably because the Platinum Dragon is stronger. What is his personality like? Strong and intelligent. This is the impression I have of him. I originally thought he was a trustworthy suzerain, but the performance of the Iron and Steel Ridge royal family in the Battle of Dragon Slaying was disappointing. Anthony calmly narrated, "His Majesty Osborne has grown into a qualified king. The Battle of Dragon Slaying was the arrangement of the Eagle Kingdom, but the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom had not sent reinforcements. Even the news that Alonso had left the border had not been sent, which had been regarded as a betrayal by the Sapphire family. Even though they did not dare to fall out with the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom, the estrangement was obvious." List had formed a rough impression of Osborne and then asked, "Did the Grand Duke have any intention of letting you bring the emissary delegation here? Father hopes that Sapphire and His Highness can form a strong offensive and defensive alliance. I probably already understand the Grand Duke's intention." After the banquet, during the lunch break, List took the time to play with the gifts sent by the emissary delegation. There were a total of 20 gems of various colors, about a ton of various jades, a lot of adamantine, orichalcum, and mithril. There was also quite a lot of wine, food, and other specialties. Perhaps they knew that List was a Fire Dragon Knight. They also sent a lot of fire attribute World of Warcraft materials. Among them there were 3 phoenix feathers. Extravagant. Feeling the surging fire attribute magic power of the phoenix feather, List could not help but sigh. The kingdom was indeed a kingdom. It was only a gift for their first meeting, but it was such a big deal. As a material produced by a subdragon, the value of the 3 phoenix feathers combined might be comparable to the tortoise shell that Carl Law carried with him. His chest was hot. Feeling the aura of the phoenix feather, Leo suddenly became anxious. He wanted to eat the phoenix feather. The magic power of the phoenix feather is only high magic. You are so big now, do you still care about a little high magic? It is better to let me wear it at all times to help my dragon fighting practice. Roar. Leo made a suggestion. He could give one to List and eat the other 2. 2 is too much. It is too wasteful to eat them. I will give you one to taste, I have use for the other two. List made a decisive decision. If he had descendants, they would most likely have firefighting practice. Then, the phoenix feather would obviously be the best auxiliary equipment for his descendants' cultivation. Roar. Don't be in a hurry to refuse. I am currently sending people to explore the burning mountain. When the time comes, not to mention a few phoenix feathers, we can even roast the whole subdragon and eat it. Hearing this, Leo almost drooled. He nodded and agreed. Roar. Then, List separated a phoenix feather and held it in his left hand. A suction force from his palm instantly swallowed the phoenix feather's magic power. The phoenix feather turned into dust and escaped through the gaps of his fingers. Leo, who was on his chest, let out a satisfied expression and was just short of a comfortable burp. As for the remaining 2 phoenix feathers, List directly put them into his spatial ring. After enjoying the delicacy of the phoenix feather, Leo could not wait to urge List to go to the burning mountain as soon as possible to find the subdragon phoenix. Don't worry, I will find time to go there after the new year. Although List, who had received the gifts, put on the airs of a dragon knight in the process of receiving the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom's emissary group, his words were still quite warm and polite. Of course, he did not care about the vassal state proposed by the emissary group. He directly left it to his grandfather and father to deceive. As such, 2 days passed in a flash. The emissary group, who thought that they had reached a preliminary vassal state with List, was ready to leave and follow the eldest prince back to Blue Dragon Island to celebrate the new year. Before leaving, Kent Magic Elephant made a request to List. Your Highness List, there is a great mage in my family. She is my younger sister, Kenly Truth. Knowing that there is a truth incarnation walking in the secular world, she is very eager to follow in the footsteps of a magic shooter. He flattered Achi a lot, hoping that his sister could become Achi's disciple and learn magic from her. However, Achi rarely showed up these 2 days. Even when she did, she was very cold, making him unsure. He could only make a request to List. List pondered for a moment. Sure, but she came to my territory to learn magic, so she must obey my rules. Chapter 753. The Guild of Magic had been established to receive mages from all over the world, so one more Kenly Truth wasn't much. Regardless of her background, she was a worker in the Flame territory. After sending off the emissaries and the eldest prince's party, there were only 4 days left before the new year. The atmosphere in the territory hadn't changed much. All trades and professions didn't have a holiday and went to work as usual. On the other hand, the castle had been very lively. Marquis Merlin, Madame Penelope, Meopel and his wife, Elvira, and even Lytton was forced to stay by Madame Marie. No matter how much he disliked him, he was still his half-brother. Thus, List arranged for him to go to the Knight Academy to train with Sky Knight Fox. In these 4 days, List had successfully created the second move of the Fire Dragon Knight, Dragon's Fighting Secret Manual, Burning the Heavens. The move was very exquisite and could release a huge attack power when practicing with Leo. The specific principle could be summed up as using the rolling of the fire dragon to swing the spear. The first move, Dragon Slash, focused on hacking like splitting a mountain. The second move, Burning the Heavens, focused on sweeping a large area with the spear. The improvement in strength was something to be happy about, but the light green gemstone dragon was still unconscious, which made him somewhat worried. He had risked losing 1 or 2 enchanting dragon fruit to save the dragon, but it still hadn't woken up. When he rode on the Dragon Tooth platform, he could feel the spiritual connection, but the light green gemstone dragon didn't respond. He didn't know whether it was because the injury was too severe, or if there was a malfunction during the spiritual battle that caused it to be unable to wake up. Fortunately, the aura of the light green gemstone dragon was stable and showed no signs of exhaustion. Snow covered the Dodo Island. Apart from a circle of exposed black rocks at the crater of the volcano, the rest was covered in ice and snow. As soon as Leo arrived at the Dodo Island, he directly drilled into the magma and absorbed the condensed supreme magic. The magma of the crater was of great help to Leo's growth. However, standing at the crater and smelling the pungent smell of sulfur, List looked worried. He found that the magma area at the crater was clearly shrinking, and the temperature was much lower than before. It wasn't because of the winter snow, but because the entire volcano seemed to be in a deep slumber. Achi, how long do you think the volcano on Dodo Island can last? He asked the young magician beside him. There were a few snowflakes on her blue hair, making her look even more lovely. She carefully felt the distribution of magic in the crater and finally shook her head. Brother, there's too little information a Chi can't tell. Alright, based on my intuition, in another half a year, the volcano on Dodo Island will be extinguished. I hope my guess is wrong. He really did not wish for the volcano on Dodo Island to be extinguished. Otherwise, at that time, the amount of resources needed to maintain Leo's supreme magical potion refinement would probably be enough to overwhelm him. However, it was hard to say. The fire dragon's magic power was the source of energy. It had been maintaining the production of glass, porcelain, bricks, charcoal, and so on. Expanding the scale of the business, it was not impossible to earn enough gold coins for the fire dragon to consume potions. Down from the top of the mountain, a Chi took out a broom and helped to sweep the snow on the light green sapphire dragon. List took out a canvas blanket from his spatial ring and covered the light green sapphire dragon scales that a Chi had swept clean. He even built a wooden hut at the dragon's head to shelter it from the snow. In fact, with the dragon's strong physique, these efforts were useless. However, List only used this method to let the light green sapphire dragon feel his concern. Riding a dragon did not mean that one would become the dragon's master. There was still a need to continue to improve the emotional bond between the dragon and the human, and finally engrave the first-generation Dragon Knight's spiritual brand, so that it would never be forgotten. Of course, the premise of this eternal memory was not to meet someone with a fate cheat. When all the snow was swept away and the quilt was covered, the sky was already dark. List suddenly thought of something and said to himself, I don't know how far the Eagle Kingdom's Dragon Knight reserve plan will go. If they pretend to have no light green sapphire dragon, it will probably take more than half a year. Every day there was a lot of news about the mainland kingdoms. The aftermath of the dragon-slaying war was calmer than expected, especially the decline of the Eagle Kingdom, which took the initiative to retreat from the border area. Instead, they reached a balance with the Blast Furnace Kingdom and joined forces to fight against the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom. The three countries were like the Three Kingdoms period in China, where Wu and Shu joined forces to fight against Wei. But the Eagle Kingdom should be very anxious. There are more and more Eagle ships harassing the Sapphire Caravan at sea, and the scope of harassment is getting larger and larger. It can still be maintained for the time being. My industry has not yet been spread out. Trade is mainly carried out between Sapphire, so it has not been affected much. Today's situation. Stable development was the most appropriate. List was still quite satisfied. Back at Black Horse Island, good news came. 2 new varieties of thorns were transported back from the outer island. List immediately called out Ella, who had recently been upset because of the arrival of the Pea Sprite AI She. Wow! Don't be upset. Come on, collect the pheromones. The sooner you evolve, the sooner you can compete with AI She. Otherwise you have to be quiet and don't disturb AI She. I can't protect you every time when she beats you. List wanted to laugh when he spoke. AI She looked honest, quiet, and had no personality. But after Ella repeatedly made noise several times, AI She suddenly took out a bundle of carefully woven hemp ropes from the castle's warehouse, tied Ella's hands and feet, and then hung it on the walkway of the worm room. Since then, Ella no longer dared to yell at AI She casually. It had to be said. Every sprite was not easy to deal with. At that time, when List saw Ella tied up, he already understood that this Pea Sprite was definitely an elegant sprite who was proficient in rope skills. Wow. Ella complained that List did not uphold justice for it. List shook his head. You provoked AI She first and then you were killed by her. There is no reason to help you. Well, don't complain, hurry up and collect the pheromones. Wow. Ella reluctantly collected 2 new varieties of thorns. When the collection was over, it went back to its worm room dejectedly, not knowing if it was sulking or not. However, when List called out the smoke mission, he suddenly realized that Ella was not sulking. As a sprite who always strives forward, it was not allowed to be negative in its elf life. Mission completed. Reward, a thorn sprite. That's it. List clenched his fist in excitement. Since the smoke mission had given a reward, it meant that Ella's evolution into a sprite was stable, and the probability of failure theoretically did not exist. This thorn sprite, which had been cultivated from a thorn worm, once again showed its courage. Sure enough, it was a unique sprite. But it's not enough. I have to continue to find new varieties of thorns to make Ella's evolutionary path more stable. So, after the giant algae sprite Parker and the Pea Sprite AI She, I can have a third sprite, the thorn sprite Ella. List took a deep breath. Check the new smoke mission. Mission, another year has come. You are about to reach the peak of your life after riding a dragon successfully, but there are still many wonderful things in the world that have not been experienced. Whether it is the sea or the continent, they are waiting for you to explore. Please wait for the end of the year. Reward, unknown reward. Chapter 754. No one could match Achi's speed on the sea. On the day before the New Year's Day, List and Achi first went to Ironhoof Island. After landing, they took Leo and went straight to Ironhoof City to preside over the New Year's Day celebration. After the Sapphire clan took over Iron Shoe City, Advisor Gort, Administrative Officer Blair, and Commander Garcia of the Orders of Chivalry worked hard to maintain the operation of the largest city on Iron Shoe Island. The first thing to do was to check the household register and survey the farmland. Unfortunately, no traces of sprite worms were found. Before the handover, Sapphire family had plundered them cleanly. Moreover, not a single master-level craftsman could be found among the residents of the city. Obviously, they had been transferred by the Sapphire clan long ago. Other than stonemasons, carpenters, blacksmiths, cobblers and tailors, there weren't many other types of craftsmen. Most of them were craftsmen who worked in workshops. In the end, most of the population was made up of serfs who made a living from farming. In order to ensure that these people would not starve to death, Gort and others had to buy food from the surrounding cities, and then began to arrange for the workers and serfs to work. Work in lieu of relief was an advanced governance plan brought by List. The serfs would not be given food directly, and they would only be given food if they worked. Because the farmland was going to be gradually leased out, Iron Heel City would be dominated by trade, so the serf's job was to clean up Iron Heel City. Taking advantage of this winter, he would first clean up the feces and urine, then tear down some of the empty wooden houses and build toilets. Due to the loss of a large number of people, the city, which originally had a population of 150,000, now had space for renovation. Of course, List would not invest a lot of money to renovate the city. He would simply clean up the city, build some toilets, plan the streets and maintain the appearance of the city. You can't go back to Black Horse Island to meet your families, but I will remember your hard work. Renovating the Ironhoof City, maintaining the population of 50,000 people is enough. The remaining 50,000 people need to be arranged for their migration. After the work is done, I will give each of you a credit. At the celebration banquet, List raised his glass and drank with his followers, saying some words that a leader used to fool his subordinates. The followers all expressed their determination to work hard and the atmosphere was joyous. The banquet was over. List rode on Leo and left the Ironhoof City with Achi. They returned to the sea and rode the shell back to Black Horse Island overnight. The next day, Black Horse Island entered a festive atmosphere. Most of the civilians had already taken a holiday. Even if there were civilians who worked overtime, they were paid 3 times the salary standard. Mesiro and his wife arrived at noon, followed by Lee William and his wife, Levis and Richard. Thorn's Keep was bustling with activity like never before. Before nightfall and the start of the banquet, Chrissy led the mages of the Guild of Magic to the square in front of the Thorn Fort and set off many magical fireworks. This was a research task issued by List in the Guild of Magic, and it was not difficult in itself. That was why there was such a fireworks display. When he spent the New Year's Day in the Long Taro Castle, the court great magician Grimandon, Truth released magic fireworks in the Long Taro Castle. This left a deep impression on him. If there were no fireworks, would it still be called a New Year festival? So beautiful. How lively. So happy. Looking at the magical fireworks blooming in the air, everyone's expression flickered with colorful light, constantly changing with the fireworks. It's been 3 years. List muttered silently in his heart. This was the 3rd New Year's Day he had spent in this world. Every festive season he missed his family, but he had no relatives to miss, so he quickly shook off this trace of melancholy. In any case, he was already a part of this world. I asked someone to send a potted plant from the castle as a New Year's Day gift for you. As long as you treat it well, it will repay you just like the stone flowers of the Thorn Fort. Madame Penelope came over, took his hand and chattered. All over Bramble Castle, potted plants of stone flowers were placed as decorations for the castle. After knowing that the stone flower cordyceps were bred from the potted plants she sent, Madame Penelope became more and more convinced that her potted plants were different. Now she was sometimes reluctant to send potted plants as gifts. She only gave them generously to List and other family members. However, after the stone flower, she had sent out more than 100 potted plants, yet not a single cordyceps had been found. List had received 10 potted plants in total, yet none of them had produced sprite worms. However, he still accepted Madame Penelope's kindness. Rest assured, grandmother. I have specially placed the potted plants you sent on the balcony to take good care of them, so as to prevent them from producing sprite worms one day. That's right, that's how it should be. The noisy New Year's Day subsided in the middle of the night. List returned to his bedroom, drank a cup of milk tea, operated his dragon's battle chi to evaporate the alcohol in his body, and restored his mind's clarity. Next, he opened a night novel and waited for the New Year's Day to come. After a moment, the castle's bell rang. Sapphire calendar year 153 had passed, and 154 had arrived. The smoke mission also quietly changed at this time. Mission completed. Reward: Magic Communication Array Plan. When the smoke slowly outlined the unknown reward serpentines, List's spirit was suddenly roused. It turned out to be a magic communication array plan. The value of this reward could be said to be not much less than that of a dragon. Because once the magic communication array was popularized, the benefits that could be generated would be unimaginably huge. It was similar to the invention of the telegraph or the telephone on Earth, bringing about a subversive change in society. Very good. I appreciate this mission reward. As for the magic communication array plan, it is either with a chi or with the wizard tower. Tomorrow I will ask carefully to see who invented the magic communication array plan. List was in a good mood. After taking several deep breaths, he restrained his emotions and began to check the new smoke mission. Mission: A new year will begin with the arrival of the Age of Navigation. It is time for the exploration fleet to set off to explore the sea. Keep in touch at all times. Have Yevich lead the fleet out to sea to find new islands for you to live on. Please find 3 islands outside of Sapphire's sphere of influence. Reward: The agitation of the rubber sprite worm triplets. The rubber sprite worm triplets are agitating again? It seems that after I recently shifted my attention back to the elves, I have continuously issued elf-related missions. It seems that the smoke dragon's power of fate is starting to swindle the elves. List pondered over the contents of the mission. Yevich's exploration fleet can set off, but before that I have to first create the magic communication array so that I can keep track of the fleet's movements. Every time Yevich finds an island, a chi and I will be able to arrive in time and arrange for people to develop it. Moreover, he and a chi could also replenish the fleet's supplies at any time. In fact, a chi was the best candidate to explore the archipelago. However, a chi's energy was devoted to magic experiments. As an high wizard, it seemed a bit wasteful for her to search for islands in the vast sea. After all, there were so many important mysteries waiting for a chi to explore. As his thoughts drifted, List fell asleep. Chapter 755. A chi had not been researching the communication magic circle recently, so List left a chi's lab to ask the mage tower if the mages from the Guild of Magic had come up with a solution. But before he could ask, Chris had already arrived at Thorn Castle. Chris, you're here so early today? Usually, Chris would come to Thorn Castle in the afternoon to be a chi's assistant in magic experiments and ask about magic. She now considered herself as a chi student and was about to become a chi's lackey. Of course, any mage would be happy to become a magic shooter's lackey. Your Highness, there's some progress in the Guild of Magic's experimental project. I'm about to report it to His Excellency List. Facing List, Chris was equally respectful. She was willing to be a magic shooter's lackey, but she was also willing to be a dragon knight's lackey. Anyway, in the fire territory, magic shooters and dragon knight were one family, so there was no need to distinguish who was the lackey. Oh, what's the progress? There's some progress in the communication magic circle proposed by Your Highness. We've successfully drawn a magic circle that can trigger mana retroaction from a distance, but we're still far from the communication stage. Just as he was about to look for it, the solution came knocking on his door. List was overjoyed. Tell me more. Let's go to a chi's lab first. Let's go. Returning to the lab, Chris carefully explained the results of their experiment. Generally speaking, some kind of magic circle could trigger mana retroaction. For example, releasing fire magic into a magic circle would trigger the activation of fire magic, but the activation was irregular. They could not use magic to form serpentines to transmit information. The magic circle here formed a word with runes, but the magic circle on the other side would still be agitated and would not form the same word. The mages from the Guild of Magic could not solve this problem, so they were ready to report it to a chi. However, List's eyes lit up. Chris, does this magic circle only correspond to the same type of magic? For example, fire magic can only correspond to fire magic, and water magic can only correspond to water magic? Yes, Your Highness. If that's the case, it's very easy to solve. Ah, Your Highness, is there any way to solve this problem? Chris was very surprised. Although she knew that List was very knowledgeable in magic theory, there was a big difference between theory and practice, especially when it came to magic arrays. Achi also looked at List curiously, but she wasn't surprised. In her heart, List was the most erudite scholar in the world, full of vast wisdom. Most of her knowledge was imparted to her by List, and it was also thanks to List's teachings that she could come into contact with the weave and become a magic shooter. If List were to become a mage, he would become a magic shooter sooner or later. List smiled. After pondering for a moment, he slowly said, "It's actually very simple. There are 8 types of magic power: water, fire, earth, wind, lightning, ice, and darkness. Since each type of magic power can only interact with magic power of the same type, we can create an octal coding program based on the 8 types of magic power." Octal coding program? Let's use fire magic power to represent 0, water magic power to represent 1, and so on. Let's use dark magic power to represent 7. This way, every octal can be converted to 1, and our language can be converted into 8 numeric expressions from 0 to 7 according to this octal code. Can it be expressed like this? Achi and Chris were a little confused. Humans naturally used decimal systems because a pair of hands had 10 fingers, and counting to 10 would increase 1 digit. However, there were only 8 types of magic power, so there was no way to use decimal systems and could only be converted to octal systems. Of course. List suggested again, in fact, octal systems are still too cumbersome. After all, the 4 types of magic power are very rare, and many ordinary mages will not practice these attributes. I personally think it's more practical to use binary coding. The two continue to be confused. Binary? Fire magic power represents 0, water magic power represents 1, and binary can be expressed smoothly. For example, 1 in binary is 1 streak of water magic power, 2 is 1 streak of water magic power and 1 streak of fire magic power, 3 is 2 streaks of water magic power, 4 is 1 streak of water magic power, 2 streaks of fire magic power. After listening to List's tongue-twister-like narration, Chris continued to be confused and confused. But Achi listened in fascination and quickly understood. So as long as there is a constant combination of 0 and 1, any information can be expressed? Yes. Brother, Achi seems to have understood that as long as the runes of the magic array are used to control it, the mana retroaction can be quickly transmitted. This way there is no need to achieve the same magic activity on both sides of the magic array, as long as the order of the feedback attributes is correct. Yes, that's it. I have already told you the specific coding method. Next, Achi, you will take the lead and make binary coding serpentines. First, make simple, commonly used text coding as long as it can be used. I plan to put it on the expedition fleet. Then let the mages of the Guild of Magic slowly code it. While Achi led the mages of the Guild of Magic to digest octal and binary coding, List himself was also deep in thought. He had a sudden inspiration. If the magic array could be expressed in binary, and if it was a little more complicated, could it be transformed into a calculator, or even evolved into a computer? Perhaps due to the limitations of materials, it could not be popularized into a home magic computer, but it was not impossible to make it into a supercomputer. Is there such a possibility? Maybe not, or maybe there is. But even if a computer could be made, the difficulty would be immense. There were too many theories involved, especially the logic of some hardware, which could not be figured out in a short period of time. Even if mages were smart people, they would still be confused when they were suddenly exposed to a whole new system. If there is time, I can talk to Achi about this idea. The rest depends on whether the mages are willing to study it or not. Anyway, I don't have time to make a computer. Having tasted the thrill of riding a dragon, List had long been immersed in power and could not extricate himself. He no longer cared so much about the Industrial Revolution or the scientific and technological revolution. Living in such a fantasy world and exploring the secrets of the entire world was far more interesting than developing science and technology. The smoke mission during the New Year's Day was a good expression of his wishes. The world is big and there are still many wonderful things that have not been experienced. Whether it is the sea or the continent, they are all waiting for you to explore. After the New Year's Day, after sending off Marquis Merlin's family, and then Marquis Oxtail's family, even Madame Penelope and Elvira left Thorn Castle. They had not returned to their castle for a long time, and there were too many accumulated things waiting to be dealt with. The noisy and lively atmosphere of Thorn Castle suddenly became cold and cheerless. However, List did not reveal any "all good things must come to an end" melancholy, because he had more important things to deal with. Merry Dawn Daybreak had returned from the Eagle Kingdom and brought news of the Fire Mountain Wyvern Phoenix. There was indeed a Fire Mountain and a wilderness of the Eagle Kingdom, and there were indeed local residents who had heard of the Wyvern Phoenix. They had also seen a great noble lord leading orders of chivalry to the Fire Mountain to capture the Wyvern Phoenix, but in the end, more than half of the orders of chivalry returned without success. Not only did they not find the Phoenix, but they were also almost wiped out by World of Warcraft in the forest. Achi, make a coded communication magic circle as soon as possible. We will test the limit of the communication magic circle and the strength of the long-distance transmission signal on the way. Chapter 756. This chapter is Quetfx. Thank you very much. As more and more mages gathered in the Guild of Magic, an experimental team could recruit many mages to participate, greatly increasing the speed. However, the communication magic array was highly confidential, and only a few trusted mages could participate in the core production. The binary and octal codes were something that only Achi and Chris had mastered. After all, the communication magic array could be used not only for civilian use but also for military use. Once it was mastered by foreign countries such as the Eagle Kingdom, the Dragon Knight could support any border war at any time, completely eliminating the need for manual communication. Your Highness, these are the current 4 core machines. Chris reported the progress to List every day. 2 of the core machines were in the shape of a square box. When the lid was opened, there was a complex magic structure inside. It was similar to a 3-dimensional compass, with a total of 8 layers superimposed on top and bottom, each layer inlaid with a different kind of crystal. Using the magic sensitivity of the crystal, the magic attribute was transmitted. This was the octal core machine. According to the mechanical reaction of the compass, a set of information could be encoded for interaction. However, the code needed to be manually entered, sending a magic fax like sending a telegram. Next to the 2 core machines, there were 2 flatter boxes, which also had a structure similar to the compass, but only 2 layers. This was the binary core machine, and the principle was similar to the octal core machine. It might be easier to operate, but because the octal code was long, the speed of message delivery was slow. List personally operated one core machine according to the code and communicated with the other core machine. It was really troublesome, a bit like an old-fashioned rotary dial telephone. After dialing a code, you had to wait for the compass to reset and then dial the next code. Just a simple hello on the binary core machine, List wasted a minute. If it was a sentence, it would take half an hour. I think you still have to work on the convenience aspect. For example, you can design a transmission lever on the compass and then make an external keyboard. Once you touch the keyboard button, you can directly set a code position on the compass. This will definitely greatly improve the efficiency. It had to be said that List, who came from the computer age, had a shining light of civilization in every idea. It made Achi and Chris feel as if the clouds had been dispelled, and they saw a vast new world. Your Highness, I will immediately start improving the core machine, Chris said impatiently. Don't be too anxious. You must keep this a secret. Also, Achi and I are going on a long trip so we can test the effects of these 2 core computers. Chris said, in that case, Your Highness, please give the communication magic circle a more secular name. As for the name, let's call it the Remote Wireless Mana Messenger Desktop, or simply the Wireless Magic Station, List said casually. He was imitating a radio station. The full name of a radio station was a radio station, and it used electromagnetic signals. What was used here was magic signals, so it could be called a wireless magic station or a magic station. The name was thus decided. List and Achi were also preparing to set off for the burning mountain of the Eagle Kingdom to search for the Draconic Phoenix and verify the transmission distance of the magic platform. On the sea, the white shell rode the wind and waves, and List was holding the binary core machine of the wireless magic station and constantly fiddling with the compass. At the same time, the compass would constantly rotate and give back information. Achi was fiddling with the octal core machine of the magic station. Brother, the current distance is about 800 kilometers, and the signal transmission is still stable without any signs of weakening. It can be guessed that the distribution of the magic network is very wide, and long-distance communication is not obstructed. How is the response speed on your side? There is no change in the response speed. The signal transmission speed has nothing to do with the distance. Well, it seems that the magic network is really wonderful. List exclaimed. The transmission speed of the magic network might be similar to the transmission speed of electromagnetic waves, slightly less than the speed of light. According to previous guesses, the magic network was a kind of field, and electromagnetic waves were also a kind of field. Although one was on the physical level and the other was on the magic level, the principles were still similar. However, there was one difference. Electromagnetic waves were consumed, and the farther the distance, the more serious the consumption. However, the magic network did not seem to have such a phenomenon of consumption. It was already 800 kilometers away, and the signal quality of the magic network was still stable. But thinking about it carefully, it was normal. According to the legends, during the era of the Moon Empire, the mages who ruled the world could build teleportation arrays to go to the moon. With the help of the magic network, even planet teleportation could be achieved, let alone a few messages. In a flash, they arrived at a coastline in the Eagle Kingdom. There was no one on the shore. Putting away the shell, Liszt summoned the little fire dragon Leo, who carried the two people and two magic stations high up into the clouds. With the cover of the clouds, they began to fly in the direction of the burning mountain. The blood servant had drawn a map, and the general direction could be determined. However, even with the directions of the map, the two of them still flew in the sky and landed on the ground, asking the local people about the geographical location. It took them a full 3 days to arrive at the wild forest where the burning mountain was. The forest was called the Afterglow Field, and it was the fief of a marquis. However, Liszt did not have any intention of interacting with this marquis. After finding the general area of the mark of the blood servant, he quickly contacted the vampire stationed there through his heart. Then, under the guidance of the vampire, they arrived at the burning mountain where the sky dragon and phoenix were said to reside. After sending the vampire away, Liszt and Achi directly searched in the forest. A dragon knight and a magic shooter did not need to worry about the dangers of the forest. In case they encountered an evil dragon, they could just beat it up and ride it. Casting magic eyes, Liszt constantly looked for any signs of mana feedback. It's a pity that I can't bring Loki, otherwise I could ride Loki and run in the forest as much as I want. Without Loki as a mount, and Leo was not suitable for riding in the forest, he could only carry a chi and fly, aimlessly looking for the possible habitat of the sky dragon and phoenix. This search lasted for 5 days. They did not find the sky dragon and phoenix, but they hunted a lot of them in World of Warcraft. Most of them were sprinkled with seasoning and barbecued for Leo to eat. They even encountered 2 high-level World of Warcraft, and then slaughtered and dismembered them. The meat and materials were stored in Liszt's space ring. During this time, they successfully tamed an intermediate World of Warcraft as a mount. It was a split-legged lizard, an intermediate World of Warcraft of the Earth attribute. It looked a bit ugly, but it was suitable for riding, especially since it had a relatively gentle temperament. After Liszt released Dragon's Might, the World of Warcraft immediately obediently let him drive it. It was not slow and it was able to move freely in the forest. After returning, I will give the split-legged lizard to the ox-tailed marquis. He lacks a mount. Liszt thought, the split-legged lizard's back was wider than that of an elephant. It would not be a problem for a large basket to carry a group of people. It was very suitable for the Marquis family to go on a road trip. In addition to World of Warcraft, Achi collected a large number of plant samples in the forest, waiting to go back and cultivate them. Liszt, with the help of magic eyes, also accidentally discovered 2 sprite worms. One was a Nepenthe sprite worm, a plant that could catch insects. Its value was similar to that of the Venus flytrap sprite worm that Liszt previously owned. They were both ornamental plants. The other was a sprite worm whose name was unknown. Its worm stalk was a small red tree with fiery red leaves and fiery red fruits. From a distance it looked like clusters of torches. The fruits were edible but they tasted ordinary. Judging from the plant's magic power attribute, it is a worm stalk of the fire attribute. Let's call it the torch tree. Liszt quickly named the plant. Achi, do you think the torch tree is related to the sky dragon and phoenix? There are a lot of torch trees in the vicinity. Although they are not magic ingredients, they look like burning flames. Chapter 757. This chapter is Immortal Dream Traversing. The burning mountain was a continuous mountain range. The mountainous area might exceed the area of Coral Island, and it was difficult to see the full picture of the forest. After not finding any traces of the inferior dragon phoenix for 5 days in a row, Liszt could not bear to waste time here. He resolutely decided to ride Leo and use Dragon Eye Trail to carefully search every corner of the forest. Perhaps riding the dragon would expose his traces, but he was confident that no one could stop him. Liszt's mentality was very inflated. He always felt that even if he rode a dragon and flew from the capital of the Eagle Kingdom, no one would dare to stop him. He was so confident and free. After riding the Dragon Eye Trail was opened, and the forest of the Burning Mountain suddenly appeared in his field of vision. Countless rays of mana retroaction flickered in his field of vision, most of which were World of Warcraft's radiances. The Savage Forest had always been the home of World of Warcraft. Skipping over these World of Warcraft, List mainly looked at two kinds of mana retroactions. One was the mana retroaction of plants. Any plant that glowed was undoubtedly a worm stalk or a magic ingredient, but there was bound to be a worm stalk around the magic ingredient. The other was the bright mana retroaction, which meant that it was either Advanced Warcraft or Super Warcraft, or even the inferior Dragon Phoenix he was looking for. Oh, there is a big tree glowing there. List's eyes lit up. List flapped his wings and rushed to the big tree. The big tree was the chaotic magic radiance. When List arrived, he suddenly discovered that it was a rock tree. Rock and stone trees were relatively common ironwood woods in the legendary continent, but the awkward thing was that trees grew slowly. After some rock and stone tree worm stalks gave birth to sprite worms, the sprite worm only had a lifespan of 10 years, and the time period it could influence was only 10 years. However, rock and stone trees had a growth period of hundreds of years, and the effect of the worm stalks was almost zero. It shouldn't be a stonewood sprite worm, right? He carefully looked around and found a shivering sprite hiding on a tree branch. The sprite was pale yellow and had a small, slender wooden stick on its head. Jumping down from the dragon's back, List didn't even bother with the process of hooking up with the jade powder. He directly stretched out his finger and let the little elf, who was suppressed by the dragon's might and did not dare to move, bite him. The contract was successful in an instant, so Leo also retracted his firebird. The little sprite returned to its normal liveliness and tilted its head to look at List. Bugu? Put away the cordyceps and come with me. I'll take you to a place with a lot of jade powder. List took out a small bag of jade powder and handed it to the stonewood sprite. The deliciousness of the jade powder attracted the stonewood fairy. After chewing on it a few times, she accepted List. It opened its mouth and inhaled, and the 50-meter-tall rock tree rapidly shrank down into a seed that flew into the little rock fairy's mouth. A deep pit was left on the ground. Boo-goo. Very well, let's go. List passed the stonewood sprite to Achi. He should be happy that he picked up a little sprite for free, but he was actually not very happy. The value of the stonewood sprite was indeed a little low, mainly because it took a long time for the stonewood to grow. Little sprites could only live for 100 years, and the density of the stonewood was very low. Their numbers and production were severely limited, so it was difficult for the sprites to fully utilize their farming ability. Basically, the stonewood and other ironwood used by humans were cut from the primeval forest and not planted artificially. However, picking up a little sprite was better than not picking it up at all. It was worth it to be able to affect the growth of a few stonewood trees. List quickly adjusted his emotions. I found a little sprite when I was searching on the dragon just now. I feel like I can ride Leo around the forest every day and make a living by picking up little sprites. Achi giggled. But brother, forest sprites are not that valuable. Only those bred by artificially tamed plants are valuable. Okay, that's true. Elves bred by artificially tamed plants were far more valuable than wild elves. The reason was that artificially tamed plants were mostly high-value crops such as potions, grains, fruit trees, vegetables, and raw materials. Thus the added value of the sprite soared. Most of the plants in the forest were untamed plants. Even if there were sprites, they could not make much of an impact. For example, any sprite of wildflowers, even if there was a big sprite, could only grow more wildflowers at most. When the wildflowers could not be converted into money, the sprites naturally lost their value. Unless a mutated potion was found, the value of the sprites would skyrocket instantly. At present, most of the common sprites in the elven market were sold together with potion seeds. So invisibly, the stonewood sprite became synonymous with low price. Once again he was one with the dragon. List continued to look for traces of the draconic phoenix. After half a day, when he went around a mountain, a flame suddenly appeared in his field of vision. He suddenly widened his eyes and saw clearly that halfway up a mountain in the distance, there was a big tree that did not stand out. The whole tree was shining like a flame, which was the light of mana retroaction. A fire elemental tree. Cordyceps. Leo fell and quickly approached the flame-like tree. At this time, the Dragon Eye's vision was filled with different scenery. Among the colorful flames of the tree, there were 3 scarlet spots gathered together, which were particularly bright. Could it be elven triplets again? Such a thought suddenly flashed in his mind. He had already ridden Leo into the forest. When he was about to brush the canopy, List suddenly jumped down and jumped to the position of the 3 bright red spots. When he got closer, he realized that it was not a triplet sprite but a bird's nest. There were 3 eggs lying quietly in the bird's nest. The eggs were covered with red lines and were as big as an ostrich's egg. Magic Eye was still open, and he could see that there was an extremely rich fire elemental magic in the eggs. Judging from the color of the magic, it was not low magic but high magic. In an instant, List understood the identity of the eggs: Phoenix eggs. Only the lesser dragon Phoenix had such a strong fire elemental high magic. He did not know where the lesser dragon Phoenix was, but these 3 eggs in this bird's nest must be a place that the lesser dragon Phoenix would not abandon. Guarding this place, the lesser dragon Phoenix would also become List's. He snapped his fingers. Leo flew over again with a chi on his back. A chi jumped to the ground and Leo turned into a flame and rushed into List's chest. A chi, the lesser dragon Phoenix's nest and eggs have been found. We will wait here for the lesser dragon Phoenix to come. Yeah. Roar. Leo in his magic form let out an eager cry. He wanted to eat the Phoenix eggs and said that this was what List said in advance. Don't be impatient, Phoenix eggs are used for fishing. Fishing, do you understand? We want to catch the lesser dragon Phoenix. Roar. Leo calmed down. Chapter 758. The Phoenix egg attracted most of List's attention, but the tree where the Phoenix nest was still worthy of List's careful observation. This is a worm stalk. He could easily tell. However, the sprite of the worm stalk was nowhere to be found. List circled around the tree and did not find any sprite with the same attribute as the worm stalk. Where did this sprite go? It shouldn't have been eaten and the worm stalk did not lose its magic. This Phoenix nest should have existed for a long time. Could it be that the sprite was scared away by the flood dragon Phoenix and did not dare to return? This was still a possibility. Thus he did not go far. After circling around, he returned to the fire worm stalk tree and lay dormant. Achi, have you found out what species this tree is? There are no records of similar species in the books, brother. Achi plucked a few leaves and shook her head. List also plucked a few leaves to study. The leaves were 5-pointed stars and the outline was a bit like maple leaves, but the edges were very round, completely different from maple trees. The entire tree was about 30 meters tall. The trunk was straight, the branches were also relatively round, and the bark was very smooth. The shape was very unique. This was the first time that List had seen a tree with this style. If it's not a maple tree, could it be a parasol tree? No, parasol trees don't look like this. The Phoenix, or the Phoenix, was related to the legend of World of Warcraft, which liked to rest on parasol trees. When it died, it would turn into ashes and resurrect. Unfortunately, the legend was just a legend. The 3 eggs were very good proof that even the super dragon type World of Warcraft was still just World of Warcraft. Even the fire dragon had to spend a lot of effort and could only be resurrected with List's help. How could a flood dragon casually resurrect and not die? Moreover, from the Steel Ridge Kingdom's emissary group, it could be concluded that this flood dragon was not rare. There were some in the Eagle Kingdom and there were definitely some in the Steel Ridge Kingdom. Not knowing the details, he let Achi continue to study the tree while he observed the surroundings, waiting for the flood dragon Phoenix to come and devising tactics. The Dragon Knight was very powerful, but he could not guarantee the flood dragon Phoenix's speed. If it was too fast, it would be very difficult to catch. They waited until the sky turned dark. List was not anxious at all. The birds would eventually return to their nests to hatch their eggs. That was indeed the case. When night fell, apart from a few sounds of unknown animals, the forest on Fire Mountain gradually quietened down. At this moment, List's magic eyes suddenly discovered a fiery red mana moving quickly in the distance. The magic power formed the shape of a large bird. Achi, be careful, the Phoenix is back. List unsheathed the Ice Soul Dragon slaying sword and quickly entered battle mode, concealing his aura. Achi immediately hid herself, ready to communicate with the weave and cast magic. Brother, Achi's water ring rend is ready. Listen to my password. The strategy was simple. Achi would release the water ring tear spell to contain the Phoenix, while List would go up and break the Phoenix's 2 wings. Then all that was left was to avoid the Phoenix's magic and capture it. If its resistance was too strong, they would summon Leo to suppress it. In short, it was just a big bird in World of Warcraft. There was no need for too much elaborate planning. The Phoenix quickly flew back, but when it was about to approach the tree, it suddenly turned around and circled around the tree in List's field of vision, letting out a loud, sonorous cry. It kept circling but did not land in the direction of the bird's nest. Obviously, it had discovered the intruder. I still exposed my aura and was discovered by the phoenix. List felt it was a pity, but he did not slow down. He shouted, "Achi, do it!" Boom. The magic was instantly cast, and a huge water ring appeared out of thin air, entangling the circling phoenix. Screech. The phoenix screamed and struggled. List quickly pounced and rushed into the air like lightning. The magic eye's vision was locked on the phoenix's position, and he swung the Ice Soul Dragon slaying sword at the phoenix's struggling wings. Bang! The phoenix's wings were broken by List's explosive attack. Its body tilted and it could no longer maintain its balance, falling down. With a boom, it hit the ground. After it landed, it opened its mouth and released magic. A violent circle of fire magic spread, instantly shattering the water ring. But after breaking free, it did not get a chance to breathe. List's attack had already smashed down like a storm. The elephant-like phoenix was directly stepped on by List, and then the Ice Soul Dragon slaying sword aimed at the other intact wing and smashed it, successfully breaking the bone. In just a face-to-face confrontation, the phoenix's wings were broken. It let out a tragic cry, and then its body rippled with a new circle of fire magic, similar to the advanced fire magic resistance Ring of Fire, but obviously more powerful. List stirred up his dragon's fighting spirit, and also met the attack with his fire fighting spirit, counteracting the impact of the magic. Achi's second magic came in time, and once again bound the phoenix. Taking advantage of this gap, List quickly took out the orichalcum shackles. First, one of the phoenix's feet was shackled, then the other. He pulled the bolt spring of the shackles, and the orichalcum shackles quickly closed, tightly locking the phoenix's slender feet. The other shackle was successfully locked on the phoenix's neck, and the other end was locked on the phoenix's mouth. After the shackles were closed, the phoenix could not even release magic. It stirred up all the magic in its body, but it could only turn into burning flames. Its magic was also of a high magic level, but what List was least afraid of was firefighting spirit. Bearing the flames, he forcibly tied the two sets of shackles together. At this point, the phoenix was completely bound and could not move. Although it took some effort, it did not take much time, and the strength of the phoenix was not too strong. It was slightly more difficult than capturing Marquis Wildtao, mainly relying on the advantage of its body. To be precise, its fighting strength was about the level of a domain knight. It's quite easy. Leo, stop shouting, you can eat phoenix meat sooner or later. List clapped his hands and at the same time comforted Leo, who always wanted to come out and eat meat. How could he let Leo eat it before he studied the drakes and phoenixes? But at this moment, Leo suddenly reminded him that a new phoenix was approaching at high speed, and List almost instinctively jumped on the spot. And just as he jumped away, an even larger phoenix flapped its wings and swooped down, leaving scorch marks on the place where he had just been standing. There's actually another one. Good timing, one barbecued, one boiled. List already knew the power of the phoenix, so he did not panic at all. After signaling Achi to release magic to restrain it, he flashed and moved several times to attack, breaking the phoenix's wings and throwing it to the ground. Then he took out more shackles and did the same to the new phoenix. After the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom's emissary group arrived and learned that there was orichalcum among the gifts, he immediately asked the Iron Knight Alvin Eaglesword to make several sets of orichalcum shackles. They were left to capture the phoenix. Orichalcum was an indestructible magic metal, widely used to make locks. It could be used to lock a knight, but it was more commonly used to lock World of Warcraft. After locking World of Warcraft, it was difficult to open it without external force. Roar! Seeing that the battle was over, Leo could not wait to come out and eat meat again in his heart. Wait a little longer, we haven't barbecued yet, I don't want to see you continue to eat raw meat. If you want to eat cooked food, understand? Roar. Chapter 759. The two phoenixes, which were as big as elephants, were both tied to the ground. List had time to carefully look at the phoenixes, which were known as subdragons. The subdragon was a super dragon species in World of Warcraft. In theory, it was a powerful creature second only to dragons. However, List felt that they did have some strength, but to say that they were second only to dragons, he was afraid that he underestimated the gap between World of Warcraft and dragons. The gap was so big that it was like the gap between an ordinary knight and a dragon knight or a natural moat. No wonder there were great noble lords who were not Dragon Knight, but also wanted to enter the mountain to catch the phoenixes. It seemed that these great nobles understood the subdragon species in World of Warcraft. They knew that the subdragon's strength was limited and belonged to the catchable sequence. However, the subdragon could be called a creature second only to dragons, which was somewhat magical. Their magic belonged to the high magic level, which was very rare. After all, even a magic shooter like a chi only belonged to the high magic level. Only the magic of dragons belonged to the supreme magic level. The outline of the body is similar to a pheasant, the feathers are red and yellow, and the body's most magical place is the 7 feathers behind the tail. Each tail feather is about 3.5 meters long, and the color is close to fiery red, darker than the feathers on the body. He was introducing and a chi was recording. Unfortunately, there was no camera, otherwise it would be more accurate to take pictures and record directly. Now he could only record these magical creatures through the method of words and drawings. There is no legendary phoenix crown on the head, only a tuft of raised feathers, not too magical. The eyes are very bright, the magic is also abundant, the beak is sharp, curved. In general, this is a luxurious enhanced version of a pheasant. Now I will pull out a tail feather to observe. He grabbed a tail feather of the phoenix and pulled it out of the phoenixes, but with both hands. However, the strange thing was that when the tail feather was separated from the body of the phoenix, it shrank rapidly. Almost in the blink of an eye, it shrank into a fiery red gem-like feather of 20 centimeters long. The phoenix feathers sent by Marquis Merlin and the emissary group are all like this. He handed the feather directly to a chi and took out 2 more from his spatial ring. Take a look, isn't it very strange? I have 2 exactly the same phoenix feather in my spatial ring. It's really amazing, a chi can feel the strength of the phoenix's magic condensed between the feathers. Let's try again. As Liszt spoke, he plucked another phoenix's tail feather and carefully observed it with magic eyes, looking for the most detailed changes. It was a strange change, a series of changes on the microscopic level caused by the fire element magic. But the vision of magic eyes was not detailed enough. Liszt directly handed the phoenix feather to a chi. Hold it first. Once I enter Dragon Rider mode and activate Dragon Eye Track, you can pull out a new phoenix feather and let me carefully observe it. Yes. There was a call. Leo made his grand entrance. The moment the fire dragon's burning flames appeared, it instantly suppressed the phoenix flames that were still burning the ground. The phoenix flames shrank back into its body, not even daring to emit smoke. As soon as Leo landed, he wanted to eat the phoenix. However, Liszt got on top of her and stopped her in time. Don't be impatient. This pair of phoenixes was obviously a male and a female. Perhaps if they were captured and tamed, they could breed a large number of new phoenixes in the future. It would be too much of a waste to eat them. Besides, he didn't want Leo to be controlled by his desires. Only Liszt could control him. Dragon Eye Track was used. A chi quickly controlled the water and pulled out a phoenix tail feather. The instantaneous changes were all reflected in the vision of Dragon Eye Track. The tiniest magic particles were all exposed in the field of vision. The reorganization and changes between the particles had an inexplicable pattern. Liszt was deeply immersed in it, but he couldn't grasp that trace of inspiration. A chi, pull another one. A moment later. Pull another one. Pull another one. Pull another one. Keep pulling. Don't stop. Pull another one. A chi helplessly spread her hands. Brother, the tail feathers of the 2 phoenixes have been stripped. There are no tail feathers to pull. Liszt was not done yet. Pull the feathers from the wings again. Let me see if there are the same changes in nature as the tail feathers. The phoenix with a large bald but looked resentfully at the 2 people and the dragon, unable to resist the humiliation of having its feathers plucked. However, after the wing feathers were pulled out, there was no change in nature, and they were still 1 meter long feathers. Not only did the wing feathers not change, but the feathers on the back, head, belly and other parts also did not change. Only the 7 tail feathers had a different change in nature. Looking at the miserable appearance of the phoenix with many feathers pulled out, and then looking at the 16 phoenix feathers in a chi's hands, Liszt shook his head. Just a little more inspiration and I can capture the change in the nature of the phoenix feathers. Forget it, I'll record the information first and then study it slowly. Leo roared impatiently. He wanted to eat phoenix meat. Liszt continued to stare at the phoenix, and he found that the phoenix's aura began to slowly decline. This was not because of injury but because the tail feathers were pulled out, leading to the decline of their vitality. In the next 10 minutes, no matter how Liszt and a chi treated the 2 phoenixes, Their auras still declined little by little and they finally died. Only 2 phoenix corpses were left, still full of magic. Although it was a pity that he could not tame the phoenix and embark on the path of sustainable development, List still carefully cleaned up the phoenix corpses. According to the intensity of the magic, the phoenix's eyes, beak, claws, and feathers were all removed in turn. The rest of the meat was intended to be put into the space ring, but it was suddenly bitten by Leo. Then he flew to the side and gorged on it. List was furious. Presumptuous. Achi dissuaded, "Brother, let Leo eat some meat, he is still in the development stage. If you didn't stop me, I would have beaten him up today." List complained and quickly put the other phoenix corpse into the space ring to prevent it from being taken away by Leo again. The phoenix specimen will be studied when we get back. What about the 3 phoenix eggs on the tree? The phoenix was dead and the phoenix eggs had no female phoenix to incubate. If they wanted to continue incubating, they would probably have to carry out artificial intervention. The bird egg hatching technology of Black Horse Island was not bad. Flamingo eggs and green-headed duck eggs could be hatched artificially. However, the hatching of bird eggs required strict standards, and the bird eggs in the territory were only mastered after many attempts. Forget it, I'll put it away first and then I'll find a way to hatch it artificially when I get back. List simply removed the bird nest from the tree and put it into the space ring. Before the bird egg hatches, it can be put into the gem space without destroying the activity of the bird egg. The reason is either that the unhatched bird egg has not yet developed a soul, or the bird egg can resist the soul destruction of the gem space. In short, the space ring is harmless to the bird egg. As soon as the bird nest was put in, Leo, who was not far away, suddenly let out a low roar. He turned his head and stared in a certain direction in the darkness. List felt it and used his magic eyes to look in the direction Leo was staring at. Chapter 760. A Great Elf. The elf born from the cordyceps tree full of fire magic, the elf that had been scared away by the phoenix, had returned, and it was a great elf. Instantly, there was the excitement of double happiness. Leo, be quiet. Afraid of scaring the great elf, List could not help but whisper. Hearing this, Leo lowered his head and continued to eat his phoenix meat. And the great elf hid behind a tree trunk not far away, looking in Leo's direction. As List slowly approached, it retreated for a distance, maintaining at least 30 meters away from List. It tried to hide its figure, but the bright magic was as dazzling as a light bulb. I have jade powder. List grabbed a handful of jade powder and threw it into the air. The fragrance of the jade powder immediately made the great elf's body tremble, and it involuntarily flew over, wanting to eat some jade powder. The more it ate, the happier it became. After picking up the scattered jade powder and eating it, the great elf looked at List's palm, which had a large amount of fragrant jade powder emitting the aura of magic. Gulp. The great elf seemed to swallow its saliva as it inched closer to List, flapping its wings. Soon it was 3 meters away from List. A pair of large eyes curiously sized up List, but it did not go any closer. It restrained its desire, remaining vigilant against List. Eat. Screech cluck, cluck, cluck. The great elf spat out a string of words, its tone similar to the phoenix's cry, but it was unknown if it had learned it from the phoenix. List could not understand, but that did not stop him from continuing. Come eat, delicious jade powder cannot be missed. Screech. In the end, the great elf could not resist its desire for the jade powder. It rushed to List's hand, grabbed a small handful of jade powder and ran away. After eating happily, it ran back again. After going back and forth 3 times, it saw List take out another handful of jade powder and finally did not run away. Just like that, it sat on List's arm and ate. And so, List smeared some jade powder on his finger and sent it to its mouth. The great sprite was a beautiful, translucent, pale white. There was a round, star-shaped leaf on its head. It was very cute. It was puzzled at first, but it still took a bite of List's finger. The teeth of elves were especially good. After all, they were creatures that liked to eat jade powder. In addition, List used his chi to inflate the skin of his fingers, making it look as if it could be broken with a single blow. As soon as the great sprite moved its mouth, it immediately bit through List's skin. In an instant, he felt the connection between their souls, and a special sense of intimacy was transmitted. The great elf was confused, not knowing what was going on. List quickly sent a comforting message to it. Don't be afraid, little guy. We're a family now. I have a lot of jade powder at home, you can eat as much as you want. Through the telepathic connection of the contract, the big elf understood. She nodded obediently and pointed at Leo, who was eating meat. Screech. It was actually expressing that it liked Leo. Is that so? List was very happy about his fourth great elf. Through the changes in his memories, he knew that this great elf was about 100 years old. It wasn't young, but it was calm and natural. It didn't have the violent temper of wild elves. Then do you want to touch it? Yes. Then go ahead. Don't be afraid, Leo won't hurt you. Under List's encouragement, the great elf hesitated for a long time. Finally, it gathered its courage and flew to one of Leo's scales. Then it reached out its little hand and carefully touched Leo. Then it quickly flew back to List's side and grinned. Cluck cluck cluck. Leo glared at List with dissatisfaction. If List hadn't communicated with it through the Dragonheart code and told it not to move, it would have definitely eaten this little guy. Achi curiously looked at the great elf, who was still making strange noises to express its laughter. Brother, since the great elf likes dragons, does it mean that it actually wants to complete its own evolution through contact with dragons? It was rumored that the great elf's evolution required the help of dragons in order to become a great elf. Of course, this was only a rumor. There was no definite proof. I don't know. List didn't know much about this, but it didn't prevent him from speculating. Since this great elf likes dragons and both have the fire attribute, perhaps it really is fate. Later, I will ask the Sapphire Grand Duke how the Sapphire family's great elf evolved. The Sapphire family had an oat dragon sprite, so it definitely knew how a great elf evolved into a great elf. 1 great elf, 1 lesser elf, and 2 sprite worms. 2 phoenix corpses, 14 phoenix feathers, and 3 phoenix eggs. List was very satisfied with the harvest from this trip to Burning Mountain. He decided that in the future he would continue to inquire about the information of the inferior dragon and then go on an adventure. With the Magic Eye's secret skill, coupled with the upgraded version of Dragon Eye's orbit after man and dragon unite, no treasure could escape his search. This was undoubtedly a super powerful skill for treasure hunting. With this skill, he felt that he didn't need to establish a country to develop. Just by exploring he could raise a dragon. Perhaps the dragons living in the wild relied on World of Warcraft, elves, and the like to live comfortably in the savage forest. Since this worm stock tree was chosen by the phoenix to build its nest, but it is not a parasol tree, let's just call it Phoenix Perching Parasol Tree. After a discussion with Achi, List determined the species of the worm stock tree, Phoenix Perching Parasol Tree. The great elf was the Phoenix Perching Parasol Tree. Sigh. The great elf touched the leaf on its head and didn't express its opinion. List continued, as for the Phoenix Perching Parasol Tree, its name is Ainea. Ainea was the name of the Ice Phoenix in League of Legends. The Phoenix Perching Parasol Tree great elf had an indissoluble bond with the Phoenix, so List was far-fetched and gave it the name Ainea. The previous P great elf was called Ai Shi, and this Phoenix Perching Parasol Tree great elf was called Ainea. It sounded like they were brothers or sisters. Ainea. Achi shouted. The great elf immediately turned to look at Achi. It didn't get close or avoid her but simply said, "Hey." It still couldn't speak, and in addition to its previous contact with the phoenix, it had learned a lot of bird language such as chirp and cluck, so it needed to be slowly corrected. List looked at Leo, who had finished eating the phoenix meat. Come back. Leo immediately turned into a flame and rushed into his body. He motioned for Ainea to put away the worm stalk and then began to set up camp. After the tent was set up, List took out the crystal lamp and discussed the changes of the phoenix feather with Achi in depth. He always felt that the changes in the nature of the phoenix feather contained some kind of secret. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.